Chapter 3759. Time was undoubtedly the most precious resource for the current Yishiwen. Even he could only wait patiently. While the Fortune God dynasty was in turmoil because of Yishiwen's battle, earth-shattering changes were also taking place in the outer domain. Originally, the outer domain could be said to be in a state of disunity because there was no leader like the Fortune God Heavenly Lord. After the Fortune God Heavenly Lord succeeded in ascending to the top, even the last half-step sovereign, the Chaos Overlord, was suppressed. They did not have a leader who could convince the masses. Therefore, they had to do things their own way, and the internal fighting was even crazier. The killings were far worse than within the Fortune God dynasty. But now, the situation was changed by the return of the Chaos Overlord. After the Chaos Overlord returned, he immediately set off a reign of terror. Compared to the Fortune God dynasty, there were no rules in the outer domain. Everything was decided by the person with the biggest fist. Now, it was obvious that the Chaos Overlord was the group with the biggest fist. Therefore, as soon as he returned to the outer domain, he set off a reign of terror. He ordered all the heavenly venerables in the outer domain to come on a pilgrimage, regardless of what they were doing, whether they were in closed-door cultivation or not. Discuss important matters together. What important matters were discussed together? It was to establish an orderly Chaos God dynasty, like the Fortune God dynasty. And he was like the Fortune God Heavenly Lord. In contrast, all the heavenly venerables would become high-ranking officials of the Chaos God dynasty. Everything was imitating the model of the Fortune God dynasty. In fact, the Fortune God dynasty had been running well for so many years. Although there were conflicts between the people and the Fortune God dynasty, it was controlled to an acceptable extent. Therefore, this was indeed a system that could be used as a reference. But in recent years, the foreign lands had already fallen apart, and the people's hearts were scattered. Even the Chaos Overlord couldn't make everyone obedient, unlike the Fortune Divine dynasty. The Fortune Divine dynasty itself had great authority, and it didn't matter who was in the position. Yishiwen could also gather all the heavenly venerables in the name of the Prime Minister of the Fortune God dynasty. This was a condition that the outer domain did not have. Moreover, unlike the Fortune Divine dynasty, the Fortune Divine dynasty was founded by the Fortune Heavenly Monarch. Hence, the Fortune Divine dynasty was a single entity from the very beginning. On the other hand, the Fortune Divine dynasty was divided into several foreign half-step sovereigns. Although they had all fallen, the original structure had continued to this day. Therefore, there were many people who did not accept the primal Chaos Overlord. Originally, they might not have to confront the Chaos Overlord face to face. However, it was obvious that many people were thinking too much when Yishiwen fought the Chaos Overlord to a draw. In many people's opinion, Yishiwen was able to contend against the primal Chaos Overlord by relying on a supreme treasure left behind by a half-step sovereign. In fact, there were also supreme treasures of half-step sovereigns in the outer domain. For example, the blood-colored drumstick that had appeared during the siege of the Fortune Divine capital was one of them. This was especially true for the tribes that possessed the supreme treasures left behind by the half-step sovereign. Obviously, they were unwilling to accept the rule of the Chaos Overlord because they were supreme existences in their respective territories. Who would be willing to have another tyrannical Chaos Divine dynasty over their heads? For them, Yishiwen's previous battle had opened up a whole new domain. It turned out that they could also contend against a half-step sovereign by relying on the supreme treasures of half-step sovereigns. But soon, they discovered that something was wrong. After the Chaos Overlord returned to the outer domain, the first thing he did was to summon back his former subordinates. There were very few of those subordinates that had once followed him to conquer the world. After a long period of time, they had all withered and fallen. This was only at the level of Emperor Lords and Heavenly Venerables. As for the ordinary foreign life forms, they had already been replaced for many generations. But when he blew the horn, the imprints that had been branded in the bones of those foreign life forms and tribes were revived. These imprints of allegiance were passed down from generation to generation, and now, They finally heard the call of the Chaos Overlord again. Tyrannical foreign life forms were approaching the direction of the Chaos Overlord. Many people thought that the old antiques that had died had revived from the layers of dimensional spaces. They heard the summons from the soul level, and they couldn't refuse it. It didn't take long for a terrifying army to respond to the summons and gather under the Chaos Overlord's banner. After the original subordinates, or the descendants of the original subordinates, had arrived, the Chaos Overlord began to conquer the outer domain and punish those who didn't obey him. At first, the Fortune God Dynasty thought that the Chaos Overlord intended to attack the Fortune God Dynasty, and they immediately became nervous. Under such circumstances, if they still fought with the Chaos Overlord, there was no doubt that it would make things worse. But very quickly, they found out that the Chaos Overlord was punitive expedition against the foreign land's rebellious people. But after receiving this news, the people in the Fortune God Dynasty did not feel any better, because they were very clear that the Fortune God Dynasty could suppress the outer domain with one hand and resist the invasion of the ancient era with the other. Even without the Fortune Heavenly Monarch and the former Middle Heavenly Master, they could still defend the territories that they had conquered before. To a large extent, it was because the outer domain didn't have a leader and they couldn't unite as a rope like the Fortune God Dynasty. But now, with the Chaos Overlord, the outer regions were like the Fortune God Dynasty in the past with the Fortune Heavenly Monarch. They were able to unite all of their forces. Although it was inevitable that rivers of blood would flow in the midst of a crazy expedition, and it might seem that a large portion of the outer region's strength would be reduced, but in reality, the threat to the Fortune God Dynasty would be greater because the outer regions would be unified. At that time, it would be very difficult to suppress the outer domain with one hand. But fortunately, at this critical time, Yi Shiwen appeared. Yi Shiwen presided over the Fortune God Dynasty and could contend with the Chaos Overlord. At least, the Chaos Overlord wouldn't be that much of a threat. As the primal Chaos Overlord began his expedition, it quickly set off a reign of terror. This was especially true for the primal Chaos Overlord. He had been suppressed for all these years and was no longer at his peak. If he wanted to recover, the fastest way was to devour enough blood and flesh. It was impossible to start a massacre in the Fortune God Dynasty. Obviously, with Yi Shiwen watching, it was impossible for the Chaos Overlord to succeed. In the Fortune God Dynasty, there was also the heaven-defying means of the Dragon Vein, which was enough to put him to death. Therefore, he didn't dare to make a move. But the outer domain was different. The outer domain was full of forces that didn't submit, and it just so happened that he could kill all of them to replenish his origin. While conquering the forces that didn't submit, he could restore himself at the same time. This was a win-win choice for him. Under such circumstances, an earth-shattering reign of terror was born. Wherever the Chaos Overlord's army passed, tribes were uprooted one after another, and the entire tribe was slaughtered. Whether it was men, women, old, or young, they were all killed. And these men, women, old, and young were all turned into the Chaos Overlord's blood, devoured by him. Every time he devoured tens of billions of lives, he became more tyrannical, and his vitality recovered more and more. His ferocious flames also became more and more ferocious. No one could stop him at all. Finally, such a tyrannical Chaos Overlord finally caused a collective panic among the major forces in the outer domain. As a result, several major forces in the outer domain finally gathered and formed an alliance. This alliance included the leaders of the major forces in the four outer domain. It could be said that 3/4 of the forces in the outer domain had gathered here to challenge the Chaos Overlord. And this war would also determine the situation of the entire outer domain. At the beginning, the alliance had an absolute advantage. Whether it was the number of troops or the number of experts, they completely had the upper hand, several times more than the Chaos Overlord subordinates. But when the Chaos Overlord made his move, the situation was completely different. As soon as the Chaos Overlord made his move, in an instant, the sky and earth changed color, and the entire outer domain changed color. And on the side of the alliance, several peak heavenly masters stood out one after another, holding half-step sovereign-level Tao artifacts, in an attempt to stop the Chaos Overlord's footsteps. But when they really fought, they realized that they were completely wrong. Even with half-step sovereign-level Tao artifacts, they were not the Chaos Overlord's opponent at all. The Chaos Overlord's strength had clearly surpassed them, reaching another realm. Even if they had half-step sovereign-level Tao artifacts in their hands, they wouldn't be able to stop Yi Shiwen at all. Forget about being able to beat the Chaos Overlord in the beginning like Yi Shiwen did. Later on, they would also be able to fight evenly with the Chaos Overlord. And they also held half-step sovereign-level Tao artifacts. And they also had more half-step sovereign-level Tao artifacts than Yi Shiwen. 4 half-step sovereign-level Tao artifacts exploded in the chaos at the same time, but even such a shocking lineup could not last a quarter of an hour in the hands of the Chaos Overlord. It was almost like crushing dry weeds and smashing rotten wood, defeating these peak heavenly masters. And now, they truly understood how much difference there was between them and the Eastern Heavenly Master Yi Shiwen of the Fortune God Dynasty. It was almost like the difference between heaven and earth. Not everyone with a half-step sovereign-level Tao artifact could fight against it. Only in the hands of a half-step sovereign-level Tao artifact could exert its full power. Peak Heavenly Masters could not even exert 1/10 of its power. This was also the reason why the Chaos Overlord didn't take Yi Shiwen seriously in the beginning. Who knew that Yi Shiwen would be so fierce? He completely counterattacked and completely broke out the power of the 2 supreme Tao tools. At this point, the world of the outer domain was decided in one battle. Chapter 3760. In this battle, the outcome of the outer domains was finally determined. The major forces of the outer domains were completely defeated. Without a leader, it was impossible for them to fight against the Chaos Overlord's army. However, what surprised everyone was that the Chaos Overlord didn't follow the tradition of the outer domains and annihilate these tribes and races. Even the peak heavenly venerables that opposed him didn't kill all of them. He only seriously injured them, forced them to admit defeat, and then let them go. Such an action immediately caused a great uproar, especially in the Fortune God Dynasty. This was because the Chaos Overlord's actions undoubtedly reminded them of the Fortune Heavenly Monarch. The Fortune Heavenly Monarch was also like this. The reason why the Fortune Heavenly Monarch was able to establish the Fortune God Dynasty was not only because of his outstanding strength, but also because he broke the rule of bloody slaughter that was popular in the Fortune world. Only those forces that were willing to submit would be spared, and they would unite around him. This way, the Fortune Divine Dynasty's forces would grow stronger and stronger. This was the first time someone had formed a force that transcended tribes and regions, only accepting like-minded comrades who wanted to pacify this chaotic world. Many of the tribes that were loyal to the Fortune God Dynasty were in fact the enemies of the Fortune Heavenly Monarch in the past. The Outer Realms had always lacked such ambitious and broad-minded people, so they had always been in a state of disunity. There was no way for them to unite. But now, after the Chaos Overlord came out, he obviously understood a lot of things. If they wanted to contend with the Fortune God Dynasty, they could only have hope by uniting the outer domains. If they continued to be like a plate of loose sand and did things their own way, they would forever be beaten by the Fortune God Dynasty. This was also the consensus of many of the outer domains experts. But even with this consensus, they couldn't do it to such an extent because there was a person who could convince the masses. Now that the Chaos Overlord appeared, this problem was completely solved. If that was the case, then the consequences would be unthinkable. For the Fortune Divine Dynasty, the appearance of such a terrifying colossus in the martial epic was undoubtedly an incomparably huge threat. It could pose a fatal threat to them at any time. What happened after that was just as many people had expected. The worst situation happened. The Chaos Overlord established the Chaos Divine Dynasty, which was a distant rival to the Fortune Divine Dynasty. Although it was just a newly established dynasty, and many of its systems and personnel were not complete, just the list of famous alien races that were on it was enough to make people tremble in fear. When so many behemoths gathered together, it was already terrifying enough. Without a doubt, although the Chaos Divine Dynasty had just been established, it already possessed the strength to stand on equal footing with the Fortune Divine Dynasty. However, what frightened the experts of the Fortune God Dynasty the most was not this matter, but the fact that after the Chaos Overlord became the ruler of the Chaos God Dynasty, it was obvious that the destiny of the entire Chaos God Dynasty had been strengthened. Although it could not be compared to the Fortune God Dynasty at its peak, it was still far from the current Fortune God Dynasty. After all, the Chaos God Dynasty was forcibly organized. It would take a long time for these tribes to submit wholeheartedly. Destiny was the sum of the will of all living beings. The Chaos God Dynasty still had a long way to go, but it had already begun to show signs of progress. This reminded them of the Fortune God Heavenly Monarch of the past. The Fortune God Heavenly Monarch was originally one of the many half-step sovereigns. Although he had the upper hand, he was not much stronger. However, after he established the Fortune God Dynasty, the people's hearts were aligned, and the mandate of heaven was on his side. After being blessed by the Fortune God Dynasty's destiny, he broke through the shackles in one fell swoop. In the battle with the Chaos Overlord, he finally broke through and became a sovereign expert. Many people understood this process, and there were many people who wanted to replicate it, including the Great Supremes and the City Lords of the 10 Great Divine Cities. However, they had not even stepped into the half-step sovereign realm, and it was impossible for them to have the mandate of heaven like the Fortune God Heavenly Monarch. Apart from the former Middle Heavenly Venerate, there was only one Middle Heavenly Venerate. Even so, he was only a peak Middle Heavenly Venerate. At most, he had touched the level of a ruler, but he was still far from being a true ruler. However, the Primal Chaos Overlord was only a step away. Under such circumstances, how could they not be worried that the Primal Chaos Overlord would take advantage of the situation and directly step into the sovereign realm? At that time, it would be true despair. Although this process might take millions or even tens of millions of years, such a short period of time was nothing to these heavenly masters and emperors who had lived for hundreds of millions of years. It was almost a matter right in front of their eyes. This made many people panic, and panic spread and concentrated in Yishuan's side, who asked him to be the person in charge of the Fortune God Dynasty. So he naturally had to be responsible for the current situation. Moreover, many people also secretly felt that Yishuan should not have let the Chaos Overlord go at all, and should have killed him to eliminate future troubles. Many people were quite dissatisfied with Yishuan's actions, but Yishuan's absolute strength suppressed them, so they did not dare to say anything to his face. After all, through the Chaos Overlord's expedition to the outer domain, they all understood the ferocity of the Chaos Overlord. It was not something that a peak heavenly master with a half-step sovereign realm Tao artifact could contend with. And Yishuan's previous battle with the Chaos Overlord was raised by many people without limit. In many people's opinion, it was not wrong to say that Yishuan was the current #1 heavenly master. With such strength, it was indeed enough to show disdain for all heroes. Even if he was a little worse than the Chaos Overlord, he was still much more tyrannical than them. So although they had some complaints, they did not dare to say anything. And these things, although those people hid very well, Yishuan could still feel it. In this regard, he just smiled slightly. How could those people understand? Although he appeared to be very relaxed at that time, in fact, he did not have the strength to kill the Chaos Overlord. Even if the Chaos Overlord was not at its peak, fighting to that point was actually Yishuan's limit. After all, his true combat power was still a level away, and there was no way to step into the half-step sovereign realm. How much strength could he exert was completely dependent on the good fortune treasure robe and the sword of destiny. Under such circumstances, withdrawing at the right time was the most appropriate choice. Unless he really intended to fight to a lose-lose situation and finally be taken advantage of by those old antiques from the ancient era. Although the Chaos Overlord's actions were unexpected, he quickly figured it out. The Chaos Overlord, who had suffered a big loss, finally understood that he wanted to embark on the same path as the fate creation Heavenly Lord. After all, there was such a successful case in front of him, and he certainly wanted to imitate it. Although the current Chaos God dynasty was just a newly established dynasty, it should not be underestimated. When the fate creation Heavenly Lord founded the Fortune God dynasty, no one took him seriously. However, in the end, he was the only one who stood out. Although the establishment of the Fortune God dynasty could not be said to be the only reason, it was certainly an important reason. Now, the Chaos Overlord's actions also made Yi Shiwen feel a lot of pressure. It could be said that there were internal and external troubles. External pressure from the ancient era and internal pressure from the Chaos God dynasty. When he was just an Eastern Heavenly Lord, he did not need to consider these things. However, now that he was in charge of the Fortune God dynasty, he had to consider these things. The Middle Heavenly Lord's injuries were too serious. In a short period of time, it was very difficult to recover even with the various healing treasures of the Fortune God dynasty, and his cultivation might even regress. After all, he was seriously injured by the half-moon immortal monarch, and in the end, he exhausted his life source in order to delay the three-peak Heavenly Lords. Now is the time to find the Chaos Overlord and have a chat. Yi Shiwen's figure flickered slightly, and when he reappeared, he was already in the outer domain. The direction he was heading towards was none other than the direction of the newly established Chaos God dynasty. At this time, he had just suppressed the resistance of the various forces and forced them to bow their heads. It could be said that he was proud of himself. And now, it was time for the Chaos God dynasty to hold a celebration for the establishment of the Chaos God dynasty. The leaders of the major forces in the outer domain had also come, and even the various emperor-level existences were included. This time, the venue of the celebration was set on an incomparably huge island in the Stormy Sea region. This incomparably huge island had a circumference of hundreds of millions of miles. It was simply a supercontinent. What was more amazing was that this huge island was actually an incomparably huge black tortoise. This black tortoise was originally a Heavenly Lord, but was later subdued by the Chaos Overlord, and since then, it had become his Tao field. After the Chaos Overlord was subdued, this black tortoise disappeared. It was not until the Chaos Overlord returned that this black tortoise reappeared and turned into a huge continental Tao field. And this time, the celebration, including the future core of the Chaos God dynasty, would also be held on this incomparably huge island. In the outer domain, there were actually more Emperor-Lord-level powerhouses than the Fortune God dynasty, but they could not live for a long time, so they had no way to crush the Fortune God dynasty in terms of numbers. At this time, all of them were gathered together. It was even grander than the Heavenly Lord Conference held by the Fortune God dynasty. Majestic, countless terrifying auras rushed into the sky, faintly condensing into a mighty long stream in the depths of the space. Yi Shiwen looked from afar and sighed in his heart. This was the precursor to the formation of destiny. It was obvious that the Chaos Overlord was about to become a force, unless he killed the Chaos Overlord now. But this thought only flashed in his mind for a moment, and then disappeared without a trace. He still understood the importance of priorities. Chaos Overlord, an old friend is here to ask for a drink? Is that okay? Chapter 3761. Chaos Overlord, an old friend is here to ask for a drink? Is that okay? Yi Shiwen's voice spread throughout the entire celebration venue. His undisguised voice almost immediately alarmed all the emperors and heavenly venerables present. No one noticed when Yi Shiwen had arrived at the venue. In other words, the boundaries and arrays in the venue could not stop Yi Shiwen's footsteps at all. Is it the Eastern Heavenly Master of the Fortune God dynasty? Many people were familiar with Yi Shiwen. Yi Shiwen was the most popular person in the entire Fortune God realm recently. He rose at an astonishing speed, not to mention the battle between Yi Shiwen and the Chaos Overlord. Many people saw it with their own eyes. Although the final result was a tie, Yi Shiwen made the Chaos Overlord suffer a big loss at the beginning, causing the Chaos Overlord to bleed. If they didn't know what it meant at the beginning, then now, after the Chaos Overlord's expedition to the outer domain and the establishment of the Chaos God Dynasty, they already understood what kind of terrifying strength and confidence it represented. Yes, it really is him. What is he doing here? Incomparably powerful, fierce beasts appeared one after another, each more tyrannical than the last. Panhang's presence in the hall was different from the Fortune Divine Dynasty. Some of these foreign domains' extreme Tao experts were in human form, while some were in their true form. They didn't feel restrained at all, or rather, they didn't care about it. Eastern Heavenly Master, what are you doing here? How dare you come here? At this time, a Heavenly Master of the Stormy Sea region stood up and pointed at Yi Shiwen. He almost pointed his finger in front of Yi Shiwen's nose. If it was one-on-one, of course, he would not have the guts. But now that they were in their territory, and there was the Chaos Overlord, he had the guts. Yi Shiwen just glanced at him and said, "You'd better put your hand down. Otherwise, don't come to me if I cause any permanent damage to you." You dare to threaten me? Do you know where you are? What day is it today? Is it the time for you to behave atrociously? The Heavenly Master of the Stormy Sea region was furious, but his body unconsciously followed Yi Shiwen's words. He put his arm down and did not dare to point at Yi Shiwen. The guy in front of him was someone who had even dared to beat up the primal Chaos Overlord once he went crazy. Compared to Yi Shiwen, he was really too weak. Yi Shiwen just smiled faintly. Wherever his gaze passed, the foreign Emperor Lords and Empyreans didn't dare to look him in the eye. Even peak Empyreans didn't dare to look him in the eye. Yi Shiwen's previous battle with the Chaos Overlord had really shown his prowess. Otherwise, how could they allow Yi Shiwen to be arrogant here now? They would have come up and attacked long ago. You don't have to be so hostile. I'm not here to make trouble. I just heard that the Chaos Divine Dynasty has been established, so I'm here to ask for a cup of wine. As Yi Shiwen spoke, he looked at the primal Chaos Overlord at the very top. The primal Chaos Tyrant was wearing a loose robe and was half lying on a cloud bed. His expression was a little blurred, and he looked a little tipsy. "Eastern Heavenly Master, why are you here? If there's anything, just say it." The primal Chaos Overlord looked at Yi Shiwen, and a faint killing intent flashed in his eyes. But in the end, he endured it because he knew that he couldn't kill Yi Shiwen at this time. If he fought here, he would be the one to suffer in the end. Just as Yi Shiwen had originally guessed, dragons didn't live with snakes, and the eagle in the sky wouldn't look at the ants on the ground. At this time, the primal Chaos Overlord could endure all the impatience because of that battle. The primal Chaos Overlord realized that no matter what the reason was, Yi Shiwen indeed had the qualifications to be on an equal footing with him. So, he had no choice but to humble himself. Yi Shiwen didn't stand on ceremony at all. He directly sat on a throne and said, "The first thing I'm here today is to congratulate the establishment of the Chaos Divine Dynasty." Hearing this, many of the foreign Heavenly Masters looked a little better. In their opinion, Yi Shiwen probably saw that their Chaos Divine Dynasty was powerful and wanted to represent the Fortune Divine Dynasty to admit defeat. They couldn't help but show a bit of excitement on their faces. Although they were a little unhappy that they were forced to form a Chaos Divine Dynasty, they were even secretly dissatisfied. But now that they saw the high and mighty Eastern Heavenly Master of the Fortune Divine Dynasty actually representing the Fortune Divine Dynasty to seek peace, how could they not feel proud? In the past, although they were known to pose a huge threat to the Fortune Divine Dynasty, they had never really been taken seriously by the big shots of the Fortune Divine Dynasty. Especially big shots like the East, South, West, and West Heavenly Masters. Usually, they wouldn't even look at them. They boasted that they were the center of the world, and they, the foreign Heavenly Masters, were just people outside of the Fortune Divine Dynasty, no matter how strong they were. They weren't on the same level at all, and they really didn't have this confidence. Under the situation where the Fortune Divine Dynasty had to resist the attack of the Ancient Era, they couldn't deal with the Fortune Divine Dynasty. Such a record was indeed not qualified to raise their heads in front of the Fortune Divine Dynasty. But this was just the beginning. Even the Fortune Divine Dynasty had to bow their heads. This made them taste the benefits of being a group for the first time. Yishuin couldn't help but smile when he saw the smug look on their faces. He said, "The second thing is to send the Chaos Divine Dynasty to its grave." "What, Eastern Heavenly Master? What do you want to do? Are you courting death?" "I think you are really courting death. Kill him." As soon as Yishuin's words came out, it was like poking a hornet's nest. The foreign heavenly masters and emperors suddenly became agitated. Whether it was sincere or not, it was just a show for the Chaos Overlord to see. All the heavenly masters suddenly became furious. Waves of terrifying aura instantly surrounded Yishuin. It seemed like they wanted to tear Yishuin's body into thousands of pieces. In the face of these terrifying auras, Yishuin didn't even have the slightest change in expression. Even those terrifying auras became invisible when they were 3 feet away from Yishuin. Yishuin's magic power was profound, and he possessed remarkable abilities. Although it was only a method that didn't reveal its true power, it still made many people realize that Yishuin's magic power was profound, and his magical powers were extensive. It wasn't difficult to get rid of the aura of a heavenly venerate silently. However, the difficulty of getting rid of the aura of a group of heavenly venerates and emperor lords was several times higher. It was even more horrifying to do so in such a secretive manner. Many foreign heavenly masters' eyes flashed with a bit of pondering. Yishuin didn't explain. He just looked at these people coldly, and then looked at the Chaos Overlord. The other foreign heavenly masters and emperors also looked at the Chaos Overlord. Obviously, everyone knew who the person in charge here was. Seeing that everyone's eyes were looking at him, waiting for him to make a decision, the Chaos Overlord revealed a somewhat satisfied expression. This was the reason why he established the Chaos Divine Dynasty. All foreign life forms in the world had to follow his lead. Only then would he have the possibility of contending against the Fortune Heavenly Monarch and the current Fortune Divine Dynasty. "Eastern Heavenly Master, I don't think you came here to joke with me. If you're just joking, this joke is a bit too big. Not everyone can joke in front of me without paying a price." The Chaos Overlord's voice was a bit lazy, but the cold, killing intent in his tone was obvious to everyone. Although he wasn't sure that he could kill Yishuin here, this was his territory. He was still confident that he could make Yishuin escape in a sorry state. The reason why he didn't attack immediately was that he wanted to see what this guy was up to. He didn't believe that Yishuin had come all the way from the Fortune Divine capital just to provoke him. In the process of conquering the foreign territories, he finally figured out many things after he was suppressed. Now, his former opponent, the Fortune Heavenly Monarch, the former Middle Heavenly Master, had disappeared. The current Middle Heavenly Master was also seriously injured and in a state of closed-door cultivation. Now, the person who controlled the entire Fortune Divine Dynasty was this young man with a cold smile in front of him. This person himself couldn't be underestimated, and he also represented a behemoth like the Fortune Divine Dynasty behind him. All the more he couldn't underestimate him, even if it was just a few words. Yishuin stood up from the throne and walked to the center of the entire venue. He then said in front of everyone's eyes, "Speaking of which, you probably don't understand. Do you really think that I have nothing better to do? Do you really think that I have nothing better to do and have come here to cause trouble for you?" No one spoke and looked at the Chaos Overlord again until the Chaos Overlord said, "If you have something to say, just say it. Don't be so wishy-washy. You probably don't know that you're already in big trouble. You don't even know that death is imminent." Yishuin didn't have the slightest fear in the face of the ferocious foreign creatures. He just said indifferently. His words caused all of the Emperor-level life forms and Empyreans to go berserk. Each of Yishuin's words was more and more unpleasant to hear, more and more provocative than the last. This made them all angry all of a sudden. "What did you say? Why don't you try saying it again? Believe it or not, I will kill you." However, he heard a burst of exclamation. The Celestial Master who said that he would kill Yishuin only felt a blur in front of him. Yishuin didn't know when Yishuin had flashed in front of him and grabbed his throat. He instantly felt suffocated. The power of his whole body was sealed by a strange force. He could only look at Yi Shiwen in front of him with a sneer on his face and said, "Don't take my patience for granted. You can't afford to provoke everyone. Don't think that I won't dare to make a move here." Chapter 3762. Everyone was shocked by Yi Shiwen's sudden outburst. They didn't expect Yi Shiwen to dare to make a move here. The most terrifying thing was that no one saw him make a move. Yi Shiwen was a celestial master of the seventh realm. He was definitely an outstanding figure among the celestial masters. Initially, they thought that even if he was not Yi Shiwen's opponent, a high-level celestial master would be able to contend with Yi Shiwen for a period of time. After all, Yi Shiwen wasn't the chaotic overlord. If he didn't use the good fortune robe and the sword of destiny, he could only be considered a peak heavenly master at best. But now that he made a move, they found that they were wrong. And they were ridiculously wrong. Yi Shiwen made a seventh realm heavenly master lose the ability to resist with one hand. What kind of terrifying strength was this? Many people had such a feeling in their hearts. How is this possible? They are all heavenly masters. How can he be so tyrannical? Many people couldn't believe it. It seemed as if they couldn't believe that Yi Shiwen could be so strong. They were all heavenly masters, but the gap between them was like heaven and earth. After intimidating everyone, Yi Shiwen threw the seventh realm foreign heavenly venerable to the ground like a dead dog. The foreign heavenly master coughed wildly. His face was flushed, and he felt as though he had escaped from death. If he hadn't experienced it himself, he would have almost forgotten that a mortal would be strangled to death. If he couldn't breathe, he would also die. Eastern Heavenly Master, you didn't come here to hurt my subordinates. Just say what you want. You don't have to be so mysterious. The chaotic overlord just watched without speaking. He didn't even make a move to rescue the seventh realm foreign heavenly master. He just sneered in his heart. This was an existence that could fight to a draw with him. Who do you think you are? How dare you be disrespectful to him? Not taking Yi Shiwen to heart meant that he didn't take him to heart. He knew that these people were still a little dissatisfied, so he took advantage of Yi Shiwen's hand to teach these people a lesson, to let them understand that some people couldn't be dealt with by numbers. Yi Shiwen was such a person, and so was he. And Yi Shiwen also seemed to understand this truth. So, he attacked without any scruples. "I have a message for you," Yi Shiwen said indifferently. "What news? Say it." Chaos Overlord said patiently. He was already starting to get a little impatient. "The martial epic is ending." Yi Shiwen said lightly. "Impossible. You must be joking." "Nonsense. You're just trying to mislead the masses." Many sovereign emperors and heavenly venerables of the foreign domains did not believe him at all. They directly criticized Yi Shiwen for trying to confuse the masses with lies and nonsense. As sovereign emperors and heavenly venerates, they were the strongest group of people in the world. They were extreme Tao experts, so they were very sensitive to the world. Therefore, they were very clear that the martial epic still had tens of billions of years left. Although it was past its peak, destruction was not something that could happen in a short time. They were even more certain that Yi Shiwen was simply talking nonsense. "Eastern Lord, I think you'd better explain yourself. Otherwise, I won't be polite." Although Chaos Overlord was speaking the truth, he immediately sat up on the cloud bed. His eyes flickered, and there was no trace of his previous tipsy appearance. Instantly, a horrifying aura enveloped the entire island. "All right, then I'll explain it to you clearly. According to the news our Fortune God dynasty received, several half-step sovereigns from the ancient epics plan to join forces to encircle the martial epics heavenly Tao. If they succeed, without the protection of the martial epic, not to mention our Fortune divine dynasty, even you, the entire Fortune realm and its affiliated worlds will become food in a grand banquet. Do you think those ancient epics will let us off?" Yi Shiwen continued. "And if they succeed, without the protection of the martial epic, not to mention our Fortune divine dynasty. How is that possible? The martial epic's heavenly Tao doesn't have a physical body. How can they encircle it? I don't believe it. Each ancient epic has a deep-seated hatred for each other. It's impossible for them to work together, not to mention several half-step sovereigns from the ancient epics. This is simply your fortune god dynasty's one-sided story. A bunch of nonsense. What does it have to do with me, whether you believe it or not? I'm just here to inform you that you're about to die. Chaos God Dynasty. Haha. A force that will be destroyed in 2 days. What's there to celebrate? Yi Shiwen sneered and said sarcastically. However, many foreign sovereign emperors and heavenly venerables were in a state of extreme shock. Although they instinctively wanted to refute Yi Shiwen's words, after the initial shock, they believed Yi Shiwen's words. After all, Yi Shiwen wouldn't joke about such a big matter, let alone enter the dragon's pool and tiger's den alone just to make fun of them. And if this matter wasn't groundless accusations, but the truth, then the consequences would be even more terrifying. If the heavenly Tao collapsed, they would definitely become meat on the ancient epics chopping board. In the end, as Yi Shiwen said, the Chaos God Dynasty would become a joke. It was destroyed less than 2 days after it was established. As for them, they naturally became a joke with a bold capital. How'd they do it? The Chaos Overlord looked directly at Yi Shiwen and asked. He didn't doubt that Yi Shiwen was joking, so he asked directly. To make the martial epic's heavenly Tao appear, such a method was incredible. Even he didn't dare to imagine it. Unlike the many ancient records in the Fortune God Dynasty, the Chaos Overlord was active in a very long time ago. It could even be said that it was a barbaric era. During that era, the Fortune God realm itself was still fighting crazily, so it had no time to care about the ancient epic. Although he had killed many ancient era powerhouses who entered the Fortune God realm, he actually didn't have a systematic understanding of the ancient epic. He knew some general trends, but when it came to specific details, he was also clueless. He was not much better than Yi Shiwen, who had recently come to the Fortune God realm. I don't know how they did it specifically. I only know that they obtained the means left behind by a person named Absolute Heaven Sage. He was a Dominator-level figure. Most importantly, he had succeeded before. Yi Shiwen looked at the Chaos Overlord and said directly. The Chaos Overlord's eyes lit up. Among the Dominator-level figures, he only knew of the Fate Creation Heaven Sage. That was before the Fate Creation Heaven Sage attained the Tao. After the Fate Creation Heaven Sage attained the Tao, the Chaos Overlord could never forget that terrifying and peerless aura. He was defeated by the Fortune Creation Heavenly Lord without being able to fight back. Just when he thought he was going to die, he didn't expect that the Fortune Creation Heavenly Lord didn't have any intention of killing him. The Fortune Creation Heavenly Lord had only shocked him until now. The Chaos Overlord's understanding was limited, but it didn't prevent him from guessing how terrifying a figure of that level was. Since the other party obtained the means left behind by a Dominator-level expert, the result was already very obvious. Have you fought? The Chaos Overlord asked. How many half-step Dominators did the other party have? The Chaos Overlord's words came out like a cannon. Even he couldn't remain calm in the face of several existences at his level. It wasn't just the Chaos Overlord. All the foreign Emperor-level life forms and heavenly venerables held their breaths and listened attentively to Yi Shiwen's words. Just the Chaos Overlord alone had beaten them to the point where they couldn't fight back. They had almost been killed. If there were a few more of such existences, the consequences would be unimaginable. Naturally, we have fought. Our Fortune God Dynasty's Middle Heavenly Venerables, Western Heavenly Venerables, and many high-level Heavenly Venerables were injured by one of the half-step Dominators. As for how many of them there were, we don't know. But as far as I know, I'm afraid there are no less than 5 of them. Yi Shiwen stretched out a hand, spread it open, and said. Suddenly, there were exclamations and the sound of people sucking in a breath of cold air. A single primal Chaos Overlord was already so terrifying. A single primal Chaos Overlord was enough to turn the entire Fortune realm upside down. If there were 5 of them, or even more, then the entire Fortune realm would probably be overturned. The destruction of the martial epic that Yi Shiwen mentioned was not impossible. Even if the Fortune God Dynasty joined hands with the primal Chaos Overlord, would they be able to resist the half-step sovereigns that numbered no less than 5? After all, when the Fortune realm was at its peak, which was also when the martial epic was at its peak, there were only 5 half-step sovereigns. Now, only the primal chaos overlord was left. How is this possible? Every half-step dominator is very proud and aloof. How could they be connected? The chaos overlord said quickly, as if he couldn't believe it. As far as I'm concerned, there must be someone behind all of this. However, the most important thing now is not why they are doing this, but rather they are indeed doing this. Those old guys are about to die, and in order to survive, they are willing to do anything. Yishuan said. Many people present empathized with his words. Not everyone among them could live forever. In order to survive, they would do anything. You want to join forces with me? When the Chaos Overlord heard this, he already understood what Yishuan meant. That's right. Let's not beat around the bush. Our Fortune God dynasty can't stop so many enemies, so we want to cooperate with you. Of course, you can also sit and wait for us to perish. But if we perish, you'll be buried with us. They are targeting the entire martial epic, not just the Fortune God dynasty. Yishuan looked into the Chaos Overlord's eyes and said with a smile that didn't seem like a smile, "Cooperation? What do you think?" Chapter 3763. That's right. This was Yishuan's plan. He was not willing to be the shield of the Chaos God dynasty. Why should the Fortune God dynasty rush to the front line and bear all the problems alone? He wanted to drag the Chaos God dynasty down with him. Either they join forces to fight against the foreign enemies, or they die together. Let's see who dies faster. Although he wanted to protect the Fortune God dynasty as much as possible, what was the use of protecting the Fortune God dynasty if the martial epic was gone? He would not take the blame for the Chaos God dynasty. The entire venue was so silent that one could hear a pin drop. Not even the sound of breathing could be heard. Everyone looked at the Chaos Overlord, especially the emperors and celestial venerables from the foreign domain. They all knew that the next decision of the Chaos Overlord would determine the future of the entire Chaos Divine Dynasty and even the creation realm. All of this depended on his decision. The Chaos Overlord also pondered for a long time, but he still couldn't make up his mind. The hatred between the Fortune Divine Dynasty and the Chaos Divine Dynasty must be as deep as the sea. Who knew how many experts and clansmen had died in each other's hands? But obviously, the threat of the ancient era was also a very real problem. If the Fortune God dynasty was on the front line, they might not care about it. But now that even the Fortune God dynasty was helpless, they had no choice but to face it. In particular, the other party didn't only plan to attack the Fortune God dynasty. If they attacked the Fortune God dynasty, they could just watch the battle and come out to clean up the mess. It was a good choice. The ancient era was ambitious and planned to destroy the entire martial epic and the heavenly Tao of the martial epic. If they lost their support, they would become the meat on the chopping board of the ancient era. Yishuan was relying on such a situation to dare to swagger here. He was certain that the Chaos Divine Dynasty wouldn't let the situation deteriorate to such an extent. The Chaos Overlord glanced at Yishuan and said, "Eastern Heavenly Venerate, you don't have to threaten me. It is impossible for the Chaos God Dynasty to join forces with the Fortune God Dynasty. But we will see what happens when the time comes." Yishuan cupped his hands and said, "When the time comes, I will wait for your arrival." Then, Yishuan left. His purpose of coming here had been achieved. In any case, this was much better than the worst situation he had imagined. The worst environment he had imagined was the Chaos Divine Dynasty, where the ancient era would be attacked from both inside and outside. Now, it was obvious that the Chaos Overlord had been persuaded by him. That was enough. All that was left was to go all out. Looking at Yishuan's departing figure, many experts of the Chaos God Dynasty no longer felt happy. A dark cloud was forming above the head of the newly established Chaos God Dynasty. It was impossible for them to ignore it even if they wanted to. A shadow of destruction loomed over them. Floating above the Fortune realm, Yishuan bent down and looked down. It was not just the Fortune realm, but also the billions of living beings in the entire martial epic. All of this would be a catastrophe in the future, and he would never allow that to happen. After returning from the Chaos God dynasty, Yi Shiwen entered a state of closed-door cultivation. He did not see anyone, just to prepare for the final battle. Although they did not reach an agreement to cooperate, the two giants of the martial epoch, the Fortune God dynasty and the Chaos God dynasty, had begun to make preparations because they knew how terrifying the final battle would be. At least 5 half-step sovereigns were about to lead the ancient era behind them to attack the Fortune God dynasty. Even the ordinary creatures down below sensed that something was amiss. It was as if something extraordinary was about to happen. Under the restraint of the Chaos Overlord in Yi Shiwen, the two giants did not have direct conflict for the first time. The peace that they had not enjoyed for many years appeared at this time. This cannot be denied, but it was a miracle. Such peaceful days lasted until one day. In an instant, the entire Chaos God dynasty was surrounded by a crazy and terrifying aura. Under this aura, a figure descended from the sky. However, they saw that this figure had an unimaginably terrifying aura, so powerful that even an imperial emperor, an extreme powerhouse, felt as if he had become an ant in front of it. There was a terrifying injury on his body. It was as if his body had been sliced into two. He descended directly into the northern region of the Fortune God dynasty. All the living beings in the world were trembling in front of him. I finally came in. Unfortunately, the Fortune Heavenly Monarch is no longer here. What a pity, what a pity, he said slowly. When he landed on the ground, the area within a radius of 10 million miles was directly torn apart, and the earth was pierced through. All the living beings within a radius of 10 million miles turned into a blood-colored torrent that poured into his body, healing his injuries. This was a terrifying existence. He was smiling, but his smile was incomparably cold. He did not care about the death of these countless living beings. Countless living beings were wailing, but there was nothing they could do. They simply could not resist such a powerful existence. It wasn't just the living beings within a radius of 10 million miles. All the living beings in the entire northern region were shaken. Regardless of whether they were heavenly venerates or ordinary living beings, they could all feel the terrifying aura enveloping all of them. Stop! Aren't you afraid of incurring the wrath of the heavens by doing this? All of a sudden, one of the old-timers shuddered as he recalled exactly who this person standing in front of him was. The moment Huang Xiaolong brought it up, the others also recalled the devil Dao Era's heavenless devil monarch. He was an incomparably powerful half-step sovereign realm expert from the devil Dao era. The reason why they had such an impression of him was because the heavenless devil monarch had once led an army to attack the Fortune divine dynasty, but he had been defeated by the Fortune heavenly monarch. At that time, he had encountered the Fortune heavenly monarch, who had just reached great perfection in his great Tao and had stepped into the sovereign realm. The Fortune heavenly monarch had severely injured the heavenless demon monarch with one sword strike, forcing him to flee. The Devil Epic's army had also collapsed. However, that was something that happened a long time ago during the Fortune heavenly monarch's era. Furthermore, the heavenless demon monarch had only revealed his face for a short while before being severely injured by the Fortune heavenly monarch. Thus, many people did not have a deep impression of him. In fact, during the Fortune heavenly monarch's era, the Fortune God dynasty was unparalleled. It had conquered many epochs and defeated many powerful enemies. Just the ancient epoch alone had been uprooted. Many half-step sovereign experts had been defeated, and there were even records of sovereign experts from the ancient epoch taking action. Among these people, the heavenless demon monarch did not leave a deep impression. Thus, it was only now that old Antique had dug out this person's memories. The terrifying injuries on his body had clearly been left behind by the Fortune heavenly monarch, and he had yet to recover from them. The Fortune heavenly monarch's might back then was evident. Just a casual strike from him was enough to render the heavenless demon monarch helpless. The figure grinned and said, "Finally, someone remembers me. Ha ha! Everything that the Fortune heavenly monarch did to me, I will return to you all." Chapter 3764. The heavenless demon lord's words sent everyone into a state of extreme terror. "I won't let you do whatever you want," the northern heavenly venerate said through gritted teeth. "Do you think you can do that?" The heavenless demon lord sneered. "We are not unprepared," the northern heavenly venerate bellowed. "Do as we have planned." The emperor, emperors, and heavenly venerates were already prepared. In an instant, an incomparably huge array appeared. With the northern heavenly venerate as the main array, a huge imprisonment array was formed. The target of this imprisonment array was the heavenless demon lord. "Even if I die today, I won't let you do whatever you want," the northern heavenly venerate bellowed. The heavenly venerates and emperors looked as though they were facing death with equanimity. No matter how much hatred they had no choice but to fight to the death against the heavenless demon lord. Beneath their feet was the fortune divine dynasty, their families, and their sections. If even they were defeated, then the entire northern region would be finished. Heavenless demon lord instantly felt like he had been sealed by a large array formation. How terrifying was this array formation? Even a middle heavenly venerate would be trapped in it and die little by little if they encountered a large array formation of this level. However, he didn't feel too much about it. He just smiled coldly and said, "You probably don't understand. The gap between me and a heavenly venerate isn't something you can stop." The heavenless demon lord clenched his fist and punched towards the void. Rumble! There was a deafening roar, and the whole world was shaking. The formation was shaking constantly, and the sovereign emperors and celestial venerables in various parts of the formation could only feel a tremendous force falling on their bodies. It was so strong that their internal organs were trembling, and they felt like they could vomit blood at any time. It was too terrifying, and this was even with the formation taking up most of the pressure. Otherwise, any one of them would have died if it had been them. "You want to stop me with this array?" The heavenless demon lord sneered, and the corners of his mouth curled into a mocking smile. The sky fell and the earth cracked. It was as if the whole world was shaking violently. At this moment, the North Tianzuan stepped out of the array formation and looked at the entire northern region where the heavenless demon lord had just massacred. The entire place looked like a living hell. There was grief and indignation on his face. It wasn't that he hadn't seen massacres before. There were quite a lot of massacres in the northern region, but it wasn't like this. They were turned into food as soon as they appeared. They weren't treated as humans at all. They were like ants that could be trampled to death at will. He knew that he couldn't let the heavenless demon lord do as he pleased. Otherwise, this formation wouldn't be able to stop him for long. "You want to stop me? You think you can?" When heavenless demon monarch saw heavenly venerate North step forward, he immediately understood heavenly venerate North's plan. Heavenless demon monarch wanted to use his own strength to stall heavenless demon monarch. "A mere peak Empyrean wants to stop me? You overestimate yourself." Everyone could see the mockery on heavenless demon monarch's lips. Only a powerful existence like him could. "Although I'm only a peak Empyrean, I represent all living beings in the northern region. I can't stop you. But what about the will of all living beings? You don't treat all living beings as humans and wantonly slaughter them. You will receive retribution sooner or later." The North Tianzuan looked at the heavenless demon lord and said, it was indeed impossible for him to stop heavenless demon lord with his strength. However, he had the luck of the northern region and the will of all living beings on him. Perhaps he could put up a fight. "You overestimate yourself." The heavenless demon lord was still disdainful. "We're all living beings. Heaven and earth are heartless and treat all living beings like dogs. In the eyes of heaven and earth, all living beings are no different from ants. This is the true heavenly Tao. You haven't comprehended it to this extent, so you can't even withstand a single blow. Cut the crap." The North Tianzuan was so angry that he laughed. A terrifying aura erupted from his body and instantly broke through the peak Empyrean level. He even surpassed the level of a middle Empyrean. This was because his strength had been greatly enhanced after the luck of the northern region was added to his body. Boom! The North Tianzuan instantly made his move. The endless great path boiled in his hand, and then rose into the sky, turning into a huge palm that blasted towards the heavenless demon lord. This was a kind of matchless divine technique. In an instant, a terrifying power erupted. If this had happened in the outside world, who knew how many stars would have exploded? Now, all of this power was offset by the array formation on the battlefield. In the face of this move that clearly surpassed the limits of a heavenly venerate, the heavenless demon lord didn't panic. The North Tianzuan was terrifying, but he was even more terrifying. He was able to survive the reincarnation of eras again and again, and even escape from the hands of the fortune creation heavenly lord. Naturally, he wasn't an ordinary person. The heavenless demon lord simply raised his hand and pointed a finger. In an instant, it was as if a long river of time had appeared. The light at that moment was too brilliant and incomparably gorgeous. Boom! The palm of the North Tianzuan and the finger of the heavenless demon lord collided. The sky instantly collapsed. With the collision as the center point, the shockwaves instantly spread in all directions. Even the array formation that was swept by the shockwaves couldn't help but tremble. The emperors, and heavenly venerates who were maintaining the array formation turned pale. It was really too terrifying. Just the shockwaves of the explosion were already very difficult to stop. However, they had no other choice. They had to stop it. Otherwise, the entire northern region would be finished. Thump! Thump! The North Tianzuan retreated for millions of miles before he finally calmed down. A trace of blood flowed from the corner of his mouth. In a previous collision, his heart and lungs had been injured. The heavenless demon lord was indeed terrifying. If it wasn't for the northern region destiny tiger god, he would have been seriously injured or even killed. However, the heavenless demon lord body also shook slightly. Although the North Tianzuan couldn't hurt him, it was obvious that he wasn't in a good state either. Although he was still powerful, he was no longer without weaknesses. The injuries on his body were his biggest weakness. It was obvious that the North Tianzuan had also seen through this point. He didn't want to die. The emperors, and heavenly venerates didn't want to die either. However, it was clear that the heavenless demon lord had come with the intention of annihilating them. In that case, they wouldn't lack the courage to fight. It was nothing more than a fight to the death. Therefore, although the North Tianzuan had suffered a loss in the first move, he didn't retreat. Instead, he took a step forward. He kept slapping his palms down, turning them into extremely resplendent torrents of light that flooded towards the heavenless demon lord. The heavenless demon lord didn't hold back and pointed his finger again. He quickly realized the North Tianzuan's intention and couldn't help but be furious. The North Tianzuan had grasped his obvious weakness and unleashed a series of continuous attacks, thoroughly infuriating the heavenless demon lord. "I think you're really courting death." The heavenless demon lord roared and immediately unleashed his most terrifying attack, which instantly engulfed the North Tianzuan. Boom! 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 Every time they collided, the heavens and earth would rumble, and the entire formation would be densely packed with cracks. It should be known that this array was used to trap and kill middle heavenly venerates. However, the shockwaves of the two's attacks swept through the array in no time. Wounds of various sizes appeared on the array. This was an unprecedented situation. It was easy to imagine how terrifying the shockwaves of the battle between the two were. If this goes on, I'm afraid it won't be long before the formation breaks. This is a true battle between half-step rulers. We have no way out. We can only fight to the death until the East Tianzuan arrives. Does the heavens really want to destroy our martial epic? Just a heavily injured half-step sovereign is already so terrifying. If more than 5 half-step sovereigns were to descend, it would be too frightening. Many sovereign emperors and heavenly venerates felt despair in their hearts. Did they really have a chance of winning against such a strong enemy? Bang! The North Tianzuan's figure flew out of the clump of light. He was severely injured in the exchange between the two. Blarg! The northern heavenly venerate spat out a mouthful of essence blood before he managed to stabilize himself. There was a huge bloody hole in his chest that had been pierced by the heavenless devil monarch. He had suffered a great loss during the exchange. Although he had relied on the northern region's luck to barely have the ability to challenge the severely injured heavenless demon monarch, the difference in strength between them was too great. As time dragged on, he would eventually be exposed. Not reaching that level meant not reaching it. The heavenless demon monarch's confidence was not without reason. Indeed, he had the strength to suppress the ancient times. The moment he moved, he felt like his body would fall apart. It's already pretty good that you can fight with me until now. Unfortunately, you have not reached that level. In the end, you are only a peak heavenly venerate. Borrowing the dynasty's luck is useless. I also cherish talents. As long as you are willing to submit to me, I can spare your life. The heavenless demon monarch said as he looked at the North Tianzuan, although the North Tianzuan was not worth mentioning to him. A person of this level was already an outstanding figure among outstanding figures in countless epics. Even someone as arrogant as the heavenless demon monarch was willing to give the North Tianzuan a chance. Tui. The North Tianzuan spat out a mouthful of blood and smiled with a somewhat bitter expression. I am the Fortune Divine Dynasty's North Tianzuan. Do you think it is possible for me to surrender? Come on, unless I die, you can forget about leaving. Good. You are a true man. I will send you on your way. The heavenless demon monarch shouted and took the initiative to attack. Chapter 3765. Just as the northern region's northern venerate was waiting for Yi Shiwen's reinforcements, Yi Shiwen came out of seclusion. He could sense the great changes in the world. After successfully condensing the fate of the Fortune God dynasty, he had a faint connection with the Fortune God dynasty and even the entire martial epic. If anything happened, he could sense it in the shortest time possible. However, the instant he came out of seclusion, an incomparably huge grave fell from the sky and landed on the outskirts of the Fortune God capital. Endless corpse aura spread out, covering the entire central region in almost an instant. The horrifying corpse aura spread out. Finally, the flesh of many living beings exploded when they came in contact with the death aura, turning into dead spirits. Yi Shiwen made a prompt decision, and the revered martial seal flew up. It transformed into rays of light that covered the entire sky and instantly enveloped the entire world. It formed a barrier and blocked the corpse energy within a radius of millions of miles, preventing it from spreading out. What a heavy corpse aura! Yi Shiwen frowned slightly. At this moment, he could no longer care about helping the northern region. He directly stepped into the barrier filled with corpse aura. The corpse aura wanted to corrode him, but it could not even break through the golden surface of his body. Corpse Dao Epic. Yi Shiwen quickly recognized that the corpse aura came from an epic called the Corpse Dao Epic. There were all kinds of legends about zombies in many epics, and the source of these legends was the Corpse Dao Epic. It was another terrifyingly tyrannical epic. According to the information about the Corpse Dao Epic collected by the Fortune God dynasty, the formation of the Corpse Dao Epic was very strange. The previous epic suddenly spread out with endless corpse aura, catalyzing all living beings in this epic into zombies. The laws of heaven and earth were also infected, and the heavenly Tao was also changed. Because there was no energy to go through the great apocalypse, it was born directly. It could be said that it inherited the rich heritage of two epics. When the Corpse Dao epic was in power, it was unparalleled. It even took the initiative to attack other ancient epics, infecting these ancient epics and turning them into a world dominated by the Corpse Dao. In the end, many ancient epics attacked it and destroyed it. The moment Yi Shiwen stepped into this enchantment, the huge tomb issued a cracking sound and then slowly cracked open. In the center of the grave was a coffin that looked like it was carved out of gold. The coffin suddenly opened, and the lid slowly opened. A middle-aged man with a resolute face appeared in it. However, there was a faint demonic air about him. Suddenly, the middle-aged man opened his eyes. In an instant, the sky changed color, and an endless amount of terrifying corpse aura swept out like a violent storm. It was actually going to attack the barrier formed by the martial saint seal. With just this terrifying aura, it was going to reopen the barrier. It was really terrifying. The middle-aged man flew out of the coffin and faced Yi Shiwen from a distance. A strange demonic smile appeared on his resolute face, and he said, "I didn't expect to meet such a powerful heavenly master just after coming out. As long as I swallow your blood essence, I can replenish a lot of my lifespan." Yi Shiwen just looked at the middle-aged man coldly. He could feel the loss of life from the middle-aged man. Even though the middle-aged man had already transcended the world, he still couldn't transcend life and death. Yi Shiwen had felt this from some old antiques who had yet to prove their Tao. They were like this when their lifespan was near the end and the Angel 5 decay. However, if the Angel 5 decay had already reached such a serious level, it wouldn't take long for him to die of old age. How could he still survive until now? Yi Shiwen immediately glanced at the coffin and suddenly understood. The coffin had shielded him from some kind of Tao law of death, allowing him to temporarily avoid death and lay in it to linger for a while. Once he left the coffin, his lifespan would start to count down. He has already aged to such an extent. No wonder he is willing to risk his life to kill the martial epic's heavenly Tao. Although he knew that those old antiques who dared to risk their lives were probably already forced into a dead end, he hadn't thought that it would be like this. It was already the time for their lifespan to end like this. The middle-aged man looked at Yi Shiwen arrogantly and said, "Tell me your name. Although you are still just an ant to me, you're already qualified for me, the violent corpse venerate, to remember your name." Although Yi Shiwen was still just an ant in his eyes. If he hadn't crossed that level, then he hadn't crossed that level. However, Yi Shiwen's aura was particularly strong. It had obviously surpassed the ordinary peak heavenly venerables. This made him a bit interested. Eastern heavenly venerate of the Fortune Divine Dynasty. Yi Shiwen said indifferently. The violent corpse venerate grinned and said, "Your body is pretty good. After I suck your essence blood dry and bury your body, another corpse path expert will be born in 1,000,000,000 years. At that time, I will have another general under me." Ha ha ha, just right, just right. That depends on whether you have the ability or not. Yi Shiwen didn't get angry with him, and only said coldly, "Ha ha, you have character. For the martial epic to be able to give birth to someone like you, it is not simple. Unfortunately, it will be destroyed soon." The violent corpse venerate grinned and said, "This is the place where my path to becoming a supreme ruler will be built." "In your dreams," Yi Shiwen said coldly. "What? You still want to stand in front of me? You really overestimate yourself. This time, the martial epic will fall. This is the general trend. You're just an insignificant heavenly venerate, and you want to be like a mantis trying to stop a chariot?" The violent corpse venerate said coldly. He didn't care about Yi Shiwen at all. With us half-step sovereigns taking action, the martial epic is destined to be destroyed. Who can stop us? Half-step sovereigns indeed. Half-step sovereigns are very powerful, but they haven't reached the sovereign realm yet, right? Since they haven't reached the sovereign realm yet, there is still time. Yi Shiwen said coldly. Across from him, the reviled corpse venerable just chuckled and said, "You've calculated it well. You've probably noticed that my lifespan has entered a countdown. But if you think that you alone can exhaust me to death, then you're gravely mistaken." Exhaust you to death? I have never thought of that. I only have one thought, and that is to kill you. Yi Shiwen immediately made his move. He put on the good fortune treasure robe and held the sword of fate in his hand, cutting the heavens and earth. The sword came from the west, and the sky changed color. This sword gave people a horrifying feeling as if the entire world was being cleansed in blood. You are just a puny heavenly venerate. Even if you have a half-step sovereign Tao artifact, what can you do to me? The violent corpse venerate didn't care about Yi Shiwen at all, but suddenly, all of a sudden, the void trembled. He suddenly felt as if the entire world had been locked down, directly locking him in place, and he could only directly resist this sword. The void collapsed. This sword wasn't just a sword light, but a manifestation of the sword Tao's law. It directly chopped down at him. This sword surpassed the speed of light, surpassing the speed of the Big Bang, and directly chopped down. Originally, this wasn't a big deal. However, when Yi Shiwen's sword fell down, he actually felt a kind of apprehensive feeling. This was his intuition, his sixth sense. He decided to believe in his sixth sense, but he had nothing to fear. At his level of cultivation, he had seen all kinds of storms and waves, and who knew how many peerless heroes he had seen. Bang! The violent corpse venerate directly clenched his fist, and then instantly turned into a horrifying light, smashing towards the sword. Boom! This move could be said to be earth-shattering, and the terrifying aftermath of the battle directly spread out. In an instant, the final creatures that had been affected by the violent corpse venerate's corpse aura and turned into corpses were all annihilated. They directly turned into nothingness in the boundary. Informed by relying on the martial venerate's seal, the violent corpse venerate didn't hold back with this attack, but unlike what he had expected, Yi Shiwen wasn't directly smacked away, vomiting blood and retreating. In fact, Yi Shiwen only swayed slightly, and the violent corpse venerate's power was dispersed. The violent corpse venerate was almost the same, and he didn't even gain any advantage in this attack. This was an unprecedented situation. A mere peak heavenly venerate was actually able to fight him to a draw. He couldn't help but feel a little unable to accept this. However, before he could say anything, Yi Shiwen once again slashed down in front of him. It was another heaven and earth slash. This sword was as fast as lightning, and at the same time, its power was tyrannical and terrifying. This sword illuminated the entire area and even overshadowed the light of the blazing sun in the sky. The aura of this sword shook all living beings in the central region, and it was terrifyingly powerful. How dare you? The violent corpse venerate couldn't accept this. In his eyes, this ant actually dared to take the initiative to attack him. He was simply courting death. However, he didn't have much time to think at this time. His entire body was glowing, emitting a cold corpse aura. A metallic battle armor appeared, and every scale seemed to be made of the most precious material in the world. He was already enraged, and he had to make this peak heavenly venerate of the fortune divine dynasty pay the price. He had to make him understand the terror of a half-step sovereign realm expert's rage. Boom! Both sides collided, and another earth-shattering wave rose up outside the fortune divine capital. Chapter 3766. In the northern and central regions, extremely powerful half-step sovereigns from the ancient era appeared one after the other. This was undoubtedly a huge shock for the experts of the entire fortune world. Although Yi Shiwen had already informed them that the doomsday was coming, but it had suddenly come so fast that it still shocked everyone. When half-step sovereigns made their move, they had to restrain all the experts of the great regions. Even so, it was still difficult to resist. In other words, if the entire fortune divine dynasty strength was gathered to deal with one or two half-step sovereigns, it wouldn't be a problem. However, if at least 5 half-step sovereigns joined the battle, they wouldn't be able to gather the entire fortune divine dynasty strength. Even when the central and northern regions were attacked, the experts of the various regions did not blindly come to support them. After all, they did not know if the other regions might encounter half-step sovereigns from the ancient era. Based on the appearance of these 2 half-step sovereigns in the past few years, although they were not at their peak, they were still able to delay the northern heavenly venerate and the eastern heavenly venerate. Or rather, it was the northern heavenly venerate and the eastern heavenly venerate who were barely able to delay them. The eastern heavenly venerate was doing fine, as he could still fight evenly with the evil corpse violent venerate. However, the northern heavenly venerate was only holding on with all his might. No one knew how long he could hold on for. Once the northern heavenly venerate fell, it was only a matter of time before the northern regions turned into a ghost town. Regardless of whether it was the primal chaos divine dynasty or the fortune divine dynasty, regardless of which faction they belonged to, they all felt sorry for the loss of their own kind. It was clear that these ancient epics half-step sovereigns did not come for any one of them, but for the entire martial epic. If they succeeded, they would not be able to live. Just as half-step sovereigns descended from the sky in the northern and central regions, a half-step sovereign finally appeared in the outer regions. The moment he appeared, all the abilities of the creatures in the outer regions seemed to be extracted from their bodies. Then, they turned into millions of multicolored abilities that flew towards that figure. This figure descended directly on the Chaos God capital of the Chaos God dynasty, which was also the incomparably huge island. His appearance shocked all the celestial venerates and emperor lords of the entire outer domain. It was too terrifying. Just one person could suppress the entire Tempest region. Be it sovereign emperors or heavenly venerates, none of them could retaliate. That was especially true of the foreign creatures who mainly cultivated divine abilities. Their bodies instantly exploded, turning into endless waves of blood. Their life essence was all absorbed by this figure. He was simply too powerful. There was simply no one who could match him. However, the foreign emperor and heavenly venerables didn't despair. They still had the primal chaos hegemon, who was also a powerful half-step ruler. He could protect them. State your name. A cold bellow could be heard from the chaotic sacred capital. Who else could it be other than the chaotic overlord? Era of divine abilities, lord of divine abilities. The figure spoke slowly. He actually walked into the chaos divine capital step by step, as if he wasn't worried about entering the tiger's den. He didn't care about the outer domains at all. This behavior naturally caused the dissatisfaction of many Empyreans and emperors from the outer domains. He simply didn't care about them at all. The Lord of Mystic Abilities was simply too terrifying. His towering aura suppressed everyone present, and all of a sudden, another terrifying aura erupted forth, clashing with the Lord of Mystic Abilities' aura. It was the primal chaos hegemon. The primal chaos overlord had a somewhat complicated expression on his face. What Yishiwen said earlier, that the great changes in the world might cause the entire martial epic to fall apart. He had always hoped that it was fake, but it still happened. Up until now, 3 peak half-step rulers had appeared. Any one of them could be a match for him. Although these 3 people were either hanging on to their last breaths or extremely old, he wasn't any better. The essence that he had suffered from being suppressed for so many years couldn't be replenished in a short time. Why have you come to my chaos divine dynasty? The primal chaos hegemon didn't attack immediately. Instead, he looked at the Lord of Divine Abilities in front of him. This was a strong opponent. Unless it was absolutely necessary, he wasn't willing to make an enemy of the other party. I would like to invite you to a feast of gluttony. The Lord of Divine Abilities looked calmly at the primal chaos hegemon and said, he didn't hide his origins and spoke directly. A feast? Using the martial epic as your meal? What a big appetite. The primal chaos hegemon smiled faintly, a hint of mockery in his smile. What makes you think I will agree? You should be very clear that although we won't die after losing our epic, we will forever lose the ability to advance further. Do you think I will agree? You will agree. The Lord of Divine Abilities said calmly, the destruction of the martial epic has cut off your path. However, with the martial epic as resources, it'll be enough for you to continue on your broken path. The existence of the Fortune Heavenly Monarch has already exhausted all the luck of the martial epic. It is already impossible for you to advance to the ruler realm. You have no other choice but to cooperate with us. But now that I see you, I think I understand what choice I should make. If I become like you, it will be too unsightly. The path of cultivation has always been an indomitable path. There is no possibility of turning back. So what if you prolong your life for one epic after another? After so many epics, have you broken through? The primal chaos hegemon said, you will never be able to break through because you have lost your Tao heart. Now, in this era, this is our stage. I am about to show my strength. I want to prove to the world that I am not inferior to the fortune creation Heavenly Lord. Yet you people dare to come and destroy my stage. Do you think I will agree? After saying that, the primal chaos hegemon's entire aura changed. It was not that his strength had greatly recovered, but his mentality had changed. He had once again strengthened his Tao heart. He understood that this was not an internal struggle like the one with Yishuan. Only in the martial epic would he have the highest possibility of advancing to the ruler level. Without this stage, he would also have his path cut off. Now, the Lord of Divine Abilities and the others had come to destroy his path. He compromised. Even if he prolonged his life, he would not be able to advance any further in this lifetime. The path of cultivation itself was full of thorns. If he was afraid, how could he walk this path to the end? Life and death were very important, but some things transcended life and death. Some things even transcended life and death. The primal chaos hegemon looked at the figure of Yishuan, who was fighting fiercely in the central region boundary. He was surprised. He only understood this now, but Yishuan probably understood it long ago. No wonder he could cultivate to such a level in such a short time. Since ancient times, who was not afraid of death? How many people could truly transcend life and death? Back then, the fortune creation Heavenly Lord did not compromise even in the face of the enormous pressure from the half-step rulers and even the threat of death. That was how the fortune creation god dynasty came to be. Now, he had a complete epiphany. He also wanted the world to understand that he, the primal chaos hegemon, was not inferior to anyone in this lifetime. Chapter 3767. This was a transformation of the great Tao of the mind. This allowed the primal chaos overlord to walk out of the haze of being suppressed for many years. In fact, this was also the sum of his thoughts while he was suppressed. He used this opportunity to comprehend it. An unprecedented battle erupted in the Tempest Sea region and the primal chaos divine capital. This battle was much more terrifying than the battles in the Fortune Divine Capital and the Northern region. This was because the two people in the battle were clearly stronger and in better condition than the other two half-step sovereigns. This made them even more horrifying. However, the appearance of the mystic ability Lord also plunged many people into despair. Half-step sovereigns descended one after another. This was the third one. Ordinary beings could only feel the world changing. The heavenly Tao was suddenly sealed. Problems appeared everywhere. Tsunamis, landslides, and even the sky collapsing in some places. Although the heavenly Tao had no consciousness, it was like a huge computer, handling the operations of the entire fortune realm and the various worlds of the martial epoch in an orderly manner. Why fire was hot? Why water flowed downwards? These were all controlled by the heavenly Tao. There were also some natural disasters. When the heavenly Tao was present, it naturally could not erupt all at once, turning the world into a land of ghosts. However, when the heavenly Tao was no longer present, or in other words, when it was powerless to control it, the world would collapse. There would no longer be any restrictions to regulate these actions. All sorts of natural disasters erupted at once. This was a general eruption. As time passed, these natural disasters erupted more and more violently. Soon, the various sovereign emperors and heavenly venerates had no choice but to come out and personally suppress the various natural disasters. Only they could do this. After all, they were extreme Tao experts. They could control all laws and help the world suppress all sorts of natural disasters. But even so, he still felt like he was caught off guard. These peak experts of the ancient epoch had not even made a move yet, but they were already flustered. They could not react in time. However, the situation did not improve because of the efforts of these sovereign emperors and heavenly venerates. On the contrary, it became even worse. Thus, another half-step ruler from the ancient epoch had descended. It was an old woman with a ghostly aura, but she gave off a grand and dignified feeling. She descended upon the eastern domain. Her terrifying aura instantly turned everything within 5 million kilometers of the eastern domain into a boundless ghost realm. All the living beings in the area were instantly drained of their essence blood, and their bodies turned into malicious ghosts. These malicious ghosts swarmed in all directions to open up new territories. It was simply too terrifying. As far as she could see, ordinary creatures were unable to attract her attention at all. Under the effects of the laws of the ghost Tao, they were completely turned into a river of essence blood, which then surged into her body. Only those imperial emperors and heavenly venerables could attract her attention. Kaka, these are all excellent nourishing medicines. Let Grandma love you. The old woman smiled strangely. The wrinkles on her face squeezed together, making her look extremely terrifying. She stretched out her ghastly claws, and a high-level sovereign monarch was unable to escape at all. She grabbed him, and with a sudden squeeze, the high-level sovereign monarch's head exploded. Then, as his body twitched nonstop, his blood essence was instantly sucked dry. Her complexion was obviously much better. An emperor monarch. Another emperor monarch. Over a dozen emperor monarchs were unable to retaliate at all in front of the old woman. Their heads were directly crushed, and the essence blood in their bodies was sucked dry. The essence blood of an emperor monarch was massive. Any drop of blood that fell could turn into a vast ocean. It had already transcended heaven and earth. With so many emperor monarchs captured by the old woman and their essence blood sucked dry, the old woman could clearly feel that she had become a little stronger. She had regained some of her peak strength. At that moment, another figure appeared in her ghastly eyes. This figure contained intense essence blood. It turned out to be a heavenly venerate. She opened her ghastly claws again and swiped at this heavenly venerate. Unlike the emperor monarchs, who were killed without any reaction, this heavenly venerate reacted much faster. In practically an instant, he reacted. With a loud shout, a long saber appeared in his hand, and he slashed it down at the ghostly claw. Clang! This saber seemed to strike metal. The long saber could not break this ghastly claw at all. Then, the heavenly venerate was caught. No matter how much the heavenly sovereign struggled, it was useless in front of this ghostly claw. Then the old woman grabbed him and stuffed him into her fong-filled mouth. Crunching sounds could make one's hair stand on end as blood splattered out like juice. She even burped, revealing 2 rows of terrifying fangs stained with blood. TSK, TSK. I, Granny Ghost, have not eaten to my heart's content for a very long time. The old woman laughed strangely. Without the suppression of the martial epic, this is my world. The old woman let out a sharp, ghastly howl as she ventured deeper into the eastern domain step by step. She did not advance very quickly, but with every step she took, she turned the world into a realm of ghosts. Her laws were changing everything. In the past, for a realm of ghosts to form to this degree, it would take at least hundreds of millions of years of development without anyone managing it. Now, it had formed in such a short time. All living beings in the eastern domain wept in grief. The realm of ghosts extended everywhere. Mountains of corpses and seas of blood. Countless people were calling for the existence of the East Heavenly Venerate. At this time, the guardian, the East Heavenly Venerate, should appear. Throughout the dynasties of the Fortune Divine Dynasty, every time there was a crisis like this, several supremes would come out to prevent such tragedies from happening. But at this time, Yishuan obviously had no way to come out. And at this time, as if he had finally heard the cries of all living beings, a figure blocked in front of Granny Ghost and stared at her coldly. His entire body was tall and straight, like a treasured sword that soared into the sky. The aura he exuded seemed to have turned the entire world into a huge domain of swordsmanship. He almost single-handedly blocked the expansion of the realm of ghosts. When the ferocious ghosts were about to come out, they were completely turned into nothingness by the sword aura. East Heavenly Venerate. The East Heavenly Venerate is here. East Heavenly Venerate, you finally appeared. East Heavenly Venerate, you must save us. All living beings prostrated themselves and looked at the shining and tall figure in the sky as if they had seen their savior. Seeing Yishuan was like seeing her only hope. There were indeed many emperors, and heavenly venerables in the eastern region. However, they were busy suppressing the abnormal weather in various places. They couldn't spare the time to stop this ghostly granny. Even if they stood in front of Granny Ghost, they couldn't stop her at all. The heavenly venerate, who couldn't escape in time, was the best example. That's not right. Isn't the East heavenly venerate suppressing demonic corpse mad venerate in the central domain? Ordinary living beings didn't know what was happening in the distant central domain, but the emperor lords and heavenly venerates knew. Yishiwen was fighting demonic corpse mad venerate. Since Yishiwen's main body was fighting demonic corpse mad venerate, who could be here now? This question popped up in everyone's mind. If Yishiwen's main body was in the central domain, then who was here? Soon, someone finally understood. This is a doppelganger, a doppelganger. No one expected that Yishiwen would arrange such a backup plan while he was in charge of the central domain. Many people were dissatisfied with Yishiwen's decision to guard the central domain, but they had to admit that the central domain was more important in the grand scheme of things. Moreover, the central domain was the key to guarding the entire Fortune God dynasty. If the central domain collapsed, then the Fortune God dynasty would also be finished. Only now did they know that Yishiwen had also prepared a backup plan in the Eastern Domain. However, the Eastern Domain was Yishiwen's foundation. How could he give up like this? And this was indeed Yishiwen's backup plan. It was his sword venerate's doppelganger. Even if your main body is here, you can't be my opponent. You're just a mere doppelganger, and you dare to stand in front of me? Hee hee, you're really seeking your own death. Granny Ghost looked at sword venerate in front of her and sneered. What heavenly venerate? He didn't care about it at all. Moreover, this was just a doppelganger of a heavenly venerate. In his opinion, it was impossible for it to pose any threat. Is that so? Sword venerate wasn't willing to say more. He flicked his palm, and a ribbon seal appeared in his palm. There were only 4 shining words on this ribbon seal, and it faintly connected with the entire Eastern Domain. Eastern Heavenly Venerate Seal. This time, Yishiwen didn't choose to bring the Eastern Heavenly Venerate Seal with him when he left the Eastern Domain to guard the Central Domain. The Eastern Heavenly Venerate Seal was the condensation of the entire Eastern Domain's destiny. If he brought it to the Central Domain, its power would plummet by several levels. It could only display its greatest power in the Eastern Domain. Suddenly, the Eastern Heavenly Venerate Seal flew directly into Sword Venerate's body and became one with him. At the same time, Sword Venerate's strength skyrocketed, and his aura spread out layer by layer. In an instant, it rushed to the peak of Heavenly Venerate and even surpassed the level of a peak Heavenly Venerate. His entire body was shrouded in blood-red energy, and the muscles all over his body were rupturing. The sudden influx of terrifying power caused his expression to become ferocious. Chapter 3768. Many people burst into tears when they saw Yishiwen appear. Originally, they didn't feel much about this new Eastern Venerable's imposing manner. However, now that their lives were in danger, they could only hope that the Eastern Venerable could stand up and save them. Yishiwen's expression changed. You actually integrated the destiny of the entire Eastern region into your body. Granny Ghost stared at Swordmaster. Her ghostly eyes flickered with ghostly flames. This was somewhat similar to North Tianzuan's method, but there were also differences. North Tianzuan had only borrowed the destiny of the North region, while Sword Venerable had fused the destiny of the East region into his body. Sword Venerable had used the East Tianzuan seal to do all this, obtaining power that far exceeded his original strength. This would leave behind great consequences. Even Swordmaster himself might not be able to survive. No one could really bear the terrifying destiny of a big region. It was just a matter of how long he could persist. Not to mention, this time, the entire Eastern Tianzuan seal would be greatly damaged. It might even seriously affect the destiny of the Eastern region. However, Yishiwen had no other choice at this time. Choosing Swordmaster as a backup meant that the situation had reached the most urgent point. In this case, there was no other choice. Sitting and waiting for death was not Yishiwen's style. Even if he was facing a peerless existence of a half-step ruler, he would still be willing to be cut into pieces and dragged down the Emperor. You won't be able to survive if you do this. Since you have already formed an incarnation and have your own path, you are an independent individual. If your main body sends you to die, would you agree? Granny Ghost laughed strangely. It was obvious that she wanted to provoke the relationship between Yi Shiwen and Celestial Venerate. Ordinary spirit incarnations were just avatars of the main body's will. However, the relationship between Yi Shiwen and Swordmaster was much more complicated. Although Swordmaster was an incarnation, he had his own will and his own path. Although he couldn't go against Yi Shiwen's will, he wasn't as old-fashioned as ordinary avatars. Swordmaster glanced at Granny Ghost with an indifferent and expressionless face. Your method of provocation is too low-level. Do you think it will work? We are originally one. I was used by the main body to verify another path. You are afraid. I'm afraid. Granny Gue coldly stared at the Sword Venerate with her ghostly eyes. What is there to be afraid of? Even if an ant like you integrated the destiny of the Eastern region, what can you do? You are afraid. Revered swordsman shouted. In an instant, the color of the sky changed. He didn't stay here any longer. Countless rays of sword light shot out. The light of the sword Dao Law swept out and soared into the sky. It was millions of miles long and formed a terrifying domain that could destroy everything. If Sword Venerable's Sword Principal Realm could only barely stop Granny Ghost's Realm of Ghosts, then it was now able to counterattack. More and more sword chi broke through the defenses of the Realm of Ghosts and rushed into it. Then the sword chi turned into sword principal cultivators on the spot. Every one of them was like a guardian to slay demons and devils. They formed a frenzied flow that crazily killed the former living beings and the present malicious ghosts. The sword cultivator that Yi Shiwen had evolved was too violent. Every sword principal could transform into a sword expert. Each of them had their own merits, but they were equally violent and powerful. Although those ghosts that had just turned into were also terrifying, they had just evolved. There was no ghost cultivation technique at all. They just swept through the sky with ghost energy. It was like two raging tides colliding, devouring each other and drowning everything else. You overestimate yourself. You are courting death, Granny Ghost said with a cold smile. Originally, I couldn't do anything if the destiny of this place didn't manifest. But since the borrowing seal has manifested, it's just right. I can refine a peerless martial instrument. Fate was incomparably terrifying. Naturally, the method to borrow fate was a peerless secret technique. Similarly, if it was refined into a celestial device, its power would be endless. However, generally speaking, very few people would do this. For an area that had its fate sucked away, destruction was only a matter of time. However, to Granny Gue, this did not matter. In any case, in her opinion, the martial epic was about to end. The Eastern region's luck would collapse with the martial epic. She might as well refine a magic tool. Whoosh! The Sword Venerate finally made his move. A huge formation appeared beneath his feet, and in the next instant, he and Granny Ghost Mother appeared in the primal chaos. Teleportation formation. Granny Ghost reacted instantly. With her cultivation base, her surroundings could be said to be the toughest existence in the world. No space-time array formation should be able to affect her, but she was still teleported into the primal chaos in an instant. That was the reason why she was so shocked. However, Sword Master remained calm. He already knew that such ancient formations existed everywhere in the Fortune God Dynasty. They were left behind by the Fortune Heavenly Lord. Although Heavenly Venerables would follow the unspoken rule of entering the primal chaos to avoid destroying the entire Fortune realm during the battles between the Fortune God Dynasty and the Outer Realms, the Heavenly Venerables would follow the unspoken rule of entering the primal chaos to avoid destroying the entire Fortune realm. The primal chaos was the foundation of their existence and their home. Even Heavenly Venerables were unwilling to destroy it. Moreover, they could not bear the backlash of the world. The resentment of all living beings before their deaths would affect the Heavenly Tao. They would suffer retribution sooner or later. The other Heavenly Venerables would not stand idly by. Hence, this unspoken rule had been used. But there were always people who could break the unspoken rule, and there were always people who ignored it. And these formations were used at this time because they were left behind by the fortune heavenly lord. The half-step sovereigns could be teleported away at this time. However, the price to pay was not small, so it would not be used under ordinary circumstances. At this time, a few more battlefields appeared in the universe's primal chaos. The half-step sovereigns who had descended were teleported into the primal chaos. Even the Chaos God dynasty was no exception. Although the outer realms were not under the Fortune God dynasty's jurisdiction, the Fortune heavenly lord was not a narrow-minded person. The outer realms were also a part of the Fortune realm. How could the Fortune God dynasty not be affected when it was destroyed? Many of the powerhouses on the ground breathed a sigh of relief when they saw that the half-step sovereigns had finally been teleported away. This level of powerhouse was too terrifying. No matter how powerful they were normally, they did not have the strength to fight back against such a level of existence. They're finally gone. This battle will be the end of the world. Are we really unable to break through this hurdle? Fortune, heavenly lord, your people need your strength. Heavens, please punish these people. Countless living beings wailed. They had already given up all hope for their future. They had never encountered such an attack for generations. In the face of an apocalyptic battle of this level, they did not have the strength to fight back. They did not even have the ability to decide their own fate. They could only watch helplessly as the sky fell and the earth split. This is not the time to relax. Prepare for battle with all your strength. Mobilize the elites and be ready for battle. Orders came from the Emperor's inheritance, and even the heavenly venerate's inheritance. Unlike the ordinary living beings, these peak powerhouses had received Yi Shiwen's warning. Moreover, they were very clear about what an apocalyptic battle was. These half-step sovereigns were only the first wave. They did not only come to kill to replenish their strength, but also to personally destroy the various defenses of the Fortune realm. If they attacked with an army, the Fortune God dynasty's army would not be easy to deal with. These half-step sovereigns wanted to destroy the Fortune realm's defenses with their own strength. As long as they conquered the Fortune realm, the other worlds of the martial epoch would be like meat on the chopping board. They were nothing. Therefore, after these half-step sovereigns arrived, the armies of the various ancient epochs followed closely behind. The original plan was to lock the battlefield on the epic battlefield, where the Fortune heavenly lord had set up a barrier. They could only enter the Fortune realm if they could break through the 10 great divine cities on the epic battlefield. That was because the 10 great divine cities weren't randomly arranged. In truth, it was an incomparably huge array formation that sealed the path of the ancient era's invasion of the Fortune world. Every divine city was in no way inferior to the Fortune divine capital. Even half-step sovereigns would find it very difficult to take down the 10 great divine cities. The fall of Moon City last time could only be considered an accident, considering all sorts of reasons. But now that those half-step sovereigns from the ancient epic had appeared here, it proved that the 10 great divine cities' defenses were no longer as secure. They still did not know what had happened, but they could not afford to be careless. Teams of elite soldiers were mobilized from the various inheritances. War fortresses the size of planets were also released from hidden dimensions. War beasts roaring at the sky began to come out of their cages, and ancient arrays began to operate. Powerful battleships floated in the sky, forming a huge fleet that blotted out the sky above the entire creation world. The Fortune realm's combat potential was completely unleashed. Compared to this scale, the previous battle between the Fortune God dynasty and the Chaos God dynasty was like child's play. This scale was 10 times or even 100 times greater than the previous battle. This continued until battleships that shone with the light of strange laws entered the creation realm from the distant sky. Chapter 3769. One after another, battleships glowed with the light of an inexplicable law as they leaped out of the void and charged in the direction of the Fortune divine dynasty. Space ripples kept flashing like water ripples in the sky. Every time the ripples spread, A battleship thousands of miles wide and tens of thousands of miles long would fly out of the ripples. Each of these battleships had the ability to destroy the heavens and earth, and they had been forged with countless materials. But now, they were like dumplings being thrown into a pot, densely packed together. Upon closer inspection, these battleships could be divided into different styles. Obviously, they belonged to different epochs. They were extremely tyrannical and terrifying. These battleships were divided into fleets and swept across the Fortune realm. They had no intention of gathering all their forces. Obviously, they had absolute confidence in themselves and were heading in different directions according to different epochs. Obviously, they had already divided their territories before coming here. A huge battleship flew across the sky and directly crushed an ancient inheritance. On the battleship, countless cannons opened, and countless arrays and boundaries rotated rapidly, turning into a terrifying energy tide that directly bombarded the ancient inheritance's ancestral land. In the next moment, the ancestral land turned into a speck of dust. Inheritance, boundaries, and arrays were too insignificant in the face of this attack. This was an attack that could destroy the heavens and earth. There was nothing more terrifying than this attack. After this attack, the battleship's hatch opened, and groups of iron cavalry gave off terrifying auras as they swept out. The flames of war were everywhere, and the heavens and earth were collapsing. These people did not have any other goals. They only wanted to destroy this era and everything they saw. I'll fight you to the death. In the ancestral land, an incomparably old voice sounded. Then, a figure with white hair and a stooped figure carrying a cracked spear charged towards the foreign invaders. Ancestor, it's the ancestor. Heavens, open your eyes and look at the miserable state of your people. Go, follow the ancestor and fight them to the death. This figure directly slaughtered his way into the invading army. The long spear in his hand already had cracks on it, densely covered with the marks of time. But in that instant, he erupted. It was as though he had returned to his peak, the era when he could wield his spear and kill everything. The figure was no longer stooped. He was now incomparably tall and straight. All of his snow-white hair and beard had turned black again. His figure was still tall and straight, as if he had never been seriously injured. However, everyone knew that this wasn't a good thing. He was burning the last bit of glory in his life to fight for a chance of survival for his clansmen, just like what he had done countless times for his clansmen. Boom! Wherever the spear passed, groups of invaders would instantly turn into nothingness. This was a quasi-emperor expert who had once been extremely glorious and was only a step away from becoming an extreme Dao expert. But in the end, he was still injured in a great battle. Ever since then, he went into seclusion, hoping that he could survive for a while longer. When everyone thought that he had died, he came out of seclusion again to fight for his clansmen and for the world. Countless laws on the long spear shone with the brilliance of a supreme expert. Wherever the spear light passed, it was as though a huge, immemorial divine mountain range had swept across, flattening everything. He had regained his invincibility. He had once fought terrifying enemies, and his current performance hadn't disgraced the first half of his life. However, just when everyone thought that he would be able to save the world and kill over 10,000 powerful enemies, a large hand grabbed down from the warship. It was a figure filled with ghastly aura. It was also an expert from the Ghost Epoch. His huge hand came crashing down. The ancestor of the ancestor's land raised his long spear to meet the incoming attack, but it was of no use. Any resistance seemed pale and powerless in front of this huge hand. Emperor, it's the Emperor. Many surviving creatures in the ancestor's land screamed miserably. They could only watch helplessly as the Ghost Epoch's Emperor grabbed their ancestor and swallowed him. The ancestor continuously rejected the ancestor and turned him into essence blood to replenish his exhaustion. In front of Sovereign Emperor, any kind of quasi-emperor would be too powerless. Those who had not attained the Tao had unimaginably terrifying strength. However, this was the martial epoch. Even though they were emperors and heavenly venerates, they still needed to replenish their exhaustion. Here, they could not obtain the power of the world to replenish themselves. The world here rejected them from the start, like a virus invading a healthy body. Under normal circumstances, when they entered the fortune realm, the martial epic's heavenly Tao would show its might. There would be heavenly lightning striking them, earthly fire burning them, and astral winds blowing at them. Therefore, it would be very difficult for the invaders to invade the martial epic. Their combat prowess would be reduced to less than 20 to 30% of their original strength. How could they defeat the local experts of the fortune realm? No matter how many of them came, they would just be sending themselves to their deaths. In the distant chaos era, before the Fortune Divine Dynasty was established, the entire fortune world was in a state of disunity. In the era when foreign worlds' creatures ran rampant, the fortune world was invaded by ancient eras, causing great losses. Since then, there had never been such a situation. However, now that the martial epic's heavenly Tao had disappeared, they could not even maintain the basic operations of the fortune realm, not to mention prevent the invasion of these foreign enemies. They could only watch helplessly as these foreign enemies invaded the fortune realm. Without this ancestor's protection, the ancestor's land was quickly swept through by the Ghost Epic's cavalry. The Ghost Epic's cavalry devoured all the creatures' essence blood and turned them into ghost servants for their use. The once prosperous ancestor's land had turned into a land of ghosts in a short time. Only the mournful wails of countless malicious spirits remained. Everything was gone. Such a situation was happening all over the fortune realm, and it wasn't just happening in one place. The flames of war had already spread throughout the fortune realm. The fortune realm's living creatures' mournful wails could be heard everywhere. No one could imagine what kind of miserable situation this was. Everything looked like the end of the world. Everywhere, the sky collapsed and the earth cracked. Living beings died miserably. Even death wasn't the end. Their souls turned into slaves and worked for the invaders. Countless living creatures could only cry and wail as they watched everything unfold before them. They could do nothing. They were simply too weak. At the same time, the Fortune Divine Dynasty's experts protecting them were also fighting with all their might. No matter what camp they belonged to, no matter what great Tao they cultivated, they finally showed their value. However, after being supported by the people, they who were high up above finally displayed their value. When foreign enemies invaded, they didn't cower back at all because they also knew that there was no way back, that they were forced to the edge of a cliff. Bloody battles engulfed the entire fortune realm. Armies were mobilized one after another, and countless arrows drowned out all the powerful enemies like dense layers of clouds. Countless armies fought against each other like a raging tide. Hundreds and thousands of people died at every moment falling from the sky. Who knew how many people were trampled into flesh and blood in the sky? There were experts and elites from the fortune realm, as well as experts and elites from the ancient epic. The Fortune Divine Dynasty's accumulations thoroughly erupted. Even if the ancient epic could seal the heavenly Tao and interfere with the heavenly Tao's attacks, even if the ancient epic's half-step sovereigns slaughtered them, the Fortune Divine Dynasty's accumulations were still terrifyingly strong. This was where the ancient epic's armies and experts couldn't take any shortcuts. If they wanted to destroy the martial epic, they had to step over their corpses. Both sides had no way out. The victorious side would be even more glorious, imprinting their existence in the boundless river of history. From top to bottom, heavenly venerates fought bloody battles. Sovereign emperors fought bloody battles. Quasi-emperors fought bloody battles. And god-kings fought bloody battles. However, the situation didn't turn for the better for the fortune realm. On the contrary, it worsened. As time passed, more and more ancient eras joined the fray. Although these ancient eras didn't have any half-step sovereigns, they had plenty of emperor monarchs and heavenly venerables. There were also many unrivaled armies that had conquered countless ancient epic. They appeared on the battlefield. It was impossible for these ancient epic's armies to challenge the martial epic alone. Everyone knew how terrifying the martial epic was. However, if it was just to beat them up when they were down, many people would be tempted. At the start, they needed to organize. However, as time went on, more ancient epics armies joined in, all for the sake of getting a share of this feast. The martial epic looked like it would be destroyed soon. No one was willing to miss out on this feast. These ancient epics armies did their best to participate, especially now that the martial epic could no longer turn the situation around. The more this was the case, the more they wanted to participate. Everyone wanted to participate in something that did not require much effort, but could bring great benefits. This force was like a rolling snowball, growing larger as it went, putting the martial epic into a truly desperate situation. At the start, the martial epic held a certain advantage with the peak Tao experts like the heavenly venerates and sovereign emperors. However, as more and more ancient epic experts joined in, they soon leveled out, even surpassing the martial epic. In the end, every heavenly venerate and sovereign emperor had to face 2 or even 3 or more experts of the same level. Even though they were peak Tao experts, this was a sure death situation. A pack of wolves will bite a tiger to death. I've planned this for 100,000 years, and it finally succeeded. A figure in the boundless void watched the endless massacre of the Fortune divine dynasty and could not help revealing a cold smile. Chapter 3770. This figure stood in the boundless void, looking incomparably majestic. In front of him was a huge ceiling formation. However, there was a terrifying power pouring out from the formation, as if it was suppressing an ancient, ferocious beast. Above the ceiling matrix, there was a gigantic seal character floating. It was unknown which era's language it was, but it was directly the language of the Great Tao. It was the reaction of the Great Tao to an extreme powerhouse. No matter what language it was the embodiment of the Great Tao. Hence, there was no difference. If Yishiwen were here, he would recognize this person. Who else could it be but the Half-Moon Immortal Lord? The Half-Moon Immortal Lord exuded a horrifying aura, and law talismans flew around his hand. At the same time, Yishiwen's battle with the evil corpse Berserk Venerate reached its climax in several battlefields in the primal chaos. Yishiwen had already noticed a few more battlefields in the primal chaos. Clearly, the evil corpse Berserk Venerate was not the only one who descended. However, with Yishiwen's current strength, although he could rival half-step sovereigns, that was all. Even if he could rival half-step sovereigns, he would only be able to rival one. Facing so many half-step sovereigns, he would be powerless. Furthermore, so many armies from ancient epics had entered the primal chaos. Clearly, they intended to destroy the martial epic and join in this feast. In this battle, the Fortune Divine Dynasty had no path of retreat. The primal chaos Divine Dynasty had no path of retreat. The martial epic had no path of retreat, and neither did he. Do you still want to struggle? The evil corpse Berserk Venerate smiled coldly. Do you see that? This is a mighty momentum. No one can stop it. Struggling like you is like a mantis trying to stop a chariot. Why don't you run away quickly? I escaped to the desolate border of the primal chaos, dragging out my life like a dying dog. Yishiwen laughed heartily and said, "This should be how you lived in the past. After your epic ended, you lived like a stray dog. Now, you want me to live like this? I can tell you that it is impossible." Stubborn fool. Violent corpse sovereign sneered. The primal chaos around him trembled. Even in the midst of the primal chaos, his strength didn't weaken in the slightest. On the contrary, it became even more terrifying. You've left the magic tool that condenses fate to your clone. What are you going to use to fight me? Mad Venerable Evil Corpse was also observing the other battlefields at the same time. He had also noticed the battle between Sword Venerable and Granny Ghost. Believe it or not, I will rely on my faith, Yishiwen said with a smile. Faith? Ha ha, you've cultivated to this level, yet you're still so naive. Do you really think you can turn the situation around with your so-called faith? Violent Corpse, Sovereign laughed out loud. The more he laughed, the crueler and crueler he became. Long-winded, Yi Shiwen's aura suddenly rose, and a pair of wings sprouted from his back. He instantly arrived in front of violent, venerable, evil corpse. A terrifying aura flickered in his eyes as he looked at violent, venerable, evil corpse. This time, he wasn't going to retreat. There was no other way out. Among the half-step sovereigns that had descended, there were violent corpse, sovereign, granny ghost, divine ability lord, and heavenless devil monarch. As far as he knew, there was at least one half-moon immortal monarch hiding in the dark. Or rather, the half-moon immortal monarch couldn't make a move. It wasn't easy to suppress the heavenly Tao to this extent, to the point where it couldn't even help the Fortune realm resist the invasion. Even with Sage Monarch absolute heaven's inheritance, it was still very difficult. Otherwise, Sage Monarch absolute heaven would have already unified the world. He didn't know if there were other half-step sovereigns that hadn't appeared yet, but there were already more than 5 half-step sovereigns participating in this calamity. As these half-step sovereigns led their armies to gain the upper hand in the Fortune Divine Dynasty, more and more ancient eras joined the fray. In the end, it would be just as violent Corpse Venerable had said, unstoppable, and a majestic force would form. This was a situation where a pack of wolves would bite a tiger to death. If it was just a pack of wolves, it naturally wouldn't dare to provoke the tiger. But if it was a pack of wolves, dozens, or even hundreds, then it was a different matter. If it really reached that point, even if he advanced further, he wouldn't be able to reverse the situation. It was fine if there were ordinary experts, but he was afraid that the other half-step sovereigns hiding in the dark would see the benefits and join in, taking a share of the spoils. Would these half-step sovereigns be the only ones interested in the martial epic? Yi Shiwen had never thought of it that way. It was just that these people had their own ambitions, or their lifespans were approaching, or they were forced to take the lead for various reasons. As long as the others saw that these few who took the lead had reaped enough benefits, they wouldn't turn a blind eye. And that would be the most terrifying trump card, the true fatal blow. Therefore, he had to stop this situation before it happened. He had to kill these experts and release the Heavenly Tao again. With the Heavenly Tao suppression, the Fortune God Dynasty's army would have a chance of victory. Even if they had to face experts several times their number, they still had a chance of winning. For countless years, it was the martial epic's Heavenly Tao that had protected the Fortune God realm. Otherwise, those ancient epics would have attacked long ago, using their numbers to overwhelm the Fortune God realm. Although he knew it would be very difficult, he had no other choice. From the looks of it, only the Primal Chaos Overlord could fight the Ability God realm head-on, but the Primal Chaos Overlord alone couldn't turn the situation around. Moreover, Yi Shiwen had never truly trusted the Primal Chaos Overlord. If things really went south, would the Primal Chaos Overlord fight to the death for the Fortune God realm? Or would he turn his spear and join the ranks of those who wanted a share of this feast? Yi Shiwen couldn't guarantee anything, but he knew that those ancient epics half-step sovereigns would definitely rejoice at the Primal Chaos Overlord's participation. The Fortune God Realm Monarch was broad-minded and could ignore the variables of the Primal Chaos Overlord, but he couldn't. He didn't have the strength to do so. Even his so-called strength comparable to a half-step sovereign was a realm he had barely reached by relying on a supreme artifact. From the looks of it, there was indeed no chance of survival. But there was still a chance of survival. Yes, there was a chance of survival in his plan. If he could grasp it, not only himself, but even the Fortune God realm would have a chance of survival. For the sake of that chance of survival, you must die. In an instant, Yi Shiwen had already rushed in front of the evil corpse overlord. His incomparably terrifying aura boiled and poured into the sword of destiny's hand. Billions of rays of immortal light sublimated and turned into the most terrifying sword, slashed the primal chaos. Yi Shiwen roared and poured all of his magic power into his sword. The primal chaos collapsed in front of his sword, and the cracks in the collapsed space slashed towards violent, venerable, evil corpse. Clang! An incomparably loud explosion reverberated throughout the primal chaos. The sword ruthlessly slashed at the evil corpse overlord's body. Like two terrifying rays of light, the entire primal chaos was incomparably resplendent. The evil corpse, Overlord, staggered backwards. His fists had met the terrifying, cleaving primal chaos head-on, just now. Of the three swords of destiny, each sword was like a step up, and the power of each sword was even more terrifying. Compared to the cleaving heaven and earth that Yi Shiwen had displayed before, the cleaving primal chaos was even more terrifying. The evil corpse, Overlord, walked the path of the corpse Tao. Everyone who walked the corpse Tao had an earth-shattering cultivation base. They were said to be comparable to the era of body cultivators, or perhaps even more terrifying than the era of body cultivators. The evil corpse Overlord didn't refine any half-step sovereign Tao artifacts because he had already refined his own body into a supreme artifact. This was another path, but the effects were equally terrifying. Even so, Berserk deity's finger bones were still sliced off, and dark golden blood flowed out of the broken bones and into the primal chaos. This was the first time Yi Shiwen had injured the evil corpse Overlord. Previously, no matter how they fought, even with the Sword of Destiny, Yi Shiwen couldn't injure the evil corpse Overlord. But now that the cleaving primal chaos had appeared, he could hurt the evil corpse Overlord. If the evil corpse Overlord's final move, cleaving primal chaos, might return to its former glory. Legend had it that it could slay half-step sovereigns. Unfortunately, Yi Shiwen still couldn't grasp cleaving primal chaos. He still had the cosmic creation palm, and it was powerful. But because of his limited strength, the cosmic creation palm's power was limited. He couldn't be like the good fortune heavenly monarch, who could annihilate countless enemies with a single palm. Even half-step sovereigns couldn't escape the fate of death. You can actually comprehend cleaving primal chaos? What a pity. You can't kill me without comprehending cleaving primal chaos. The evil corpse Overlord's smile grew colder, and his killing intent deepened. He naturally knew of the former Middle Heavenly Venerate's 3 Swords of Destiny. The former Middle Heavenly Venerate was so famous because he had killed half-step sovereigns. Killing experts of the same level made him famous even among half-step sovereigns. He was well aware that the 3 Swords of Destiny were stacked, and each sword was stronger than the previous one. Rumor had it that the former Middle Heavenly Venerate wanted to stack the 3 Swords of Destiny and transform it into a truly fatal sword that could severely injure or even kill Sovereign. But such rumors were just rumors. Not even the former Middle Heavenly Venerate had managed to accomplish such a feat. Is that so? Yi Shiwen looked at the evil corpse Overlord coldly. The mysterious space inside his body was frantically analyzing the final sword of the 3 Swords of Destiny, cleaving primal chaos. Chapter 3771. This was his only chance to win. Just the Sword of Fate alone wasn't enough to reverse the situation. However, if the last sword of the 3 Swords of Fate was included, then he would have the hope of killing this terrifying enemy in front of him. Mad Venerable Evil Corpse wasn't in peak condition at all. In fact, his life was slipping away. This was his biggest opportunity. But now, it seemed like Sword Master and Northern Tianzuan were barely holding on. They could be breached at any time. There wasn't much time left for him. But you dare to hurt me? I will let you taste the most terrible torture in this world. I will let you die crying. Mad Venerable Evil Corpse's palm shook slightly. The finger bone that had been cut off grew back. This injury wasn't enough to hurt his muscles or bones, but it was enough to make him furious. I will devour your flesh and blood. I will let your soul sink in my corpse Tao world forever. I will let you suffer all kinds of suffering. Boom! Mad Venerable Evil Corpse's voice fell. In an instant, his fist had already arrived in front of Yi Shiwen. The power of this fist wasn't as terrifying as the Sword of Fate. It directly pierced through the primal chaos. The primal chaos instantly boiled and rushed towards Yi Shiwen's face. It wanted to smash his head. Bang! The Great Fortune robe appeared on Yi Shiwen's body. It erupted with billions of immortal lights and protected him. Mad Venerable Evil Corpse's fist was blocked. Great Fortune Robe? It was the famous Tao tool of the Fortune Heavenly Monarch. It's a pity that it's in the hands of a Tianzuan like you. It's a waste. It should belong to me. Mad Venerable Evil Corpse saw the Great Fortune Robe, and greed flashed in his eyes. It wasn't just because of the mysteries of the Great Fortune Robe, but also because it contained the mystery of the rise of the Fortune Heavenly Monarch. Everyone wanted to know the mystery. You should try and see if you have the strength to do so. Yi Shiwen sneered. As Mad Venerable Evil Corpse rushed towards him, he slashed with the Sword of Fate. It's useless. Unless you can use the Slash of Chaos again, the Sword of Destiny alone won't be able to break through my defense. Ha ha ha. How much stamina do you have left after using the Slash of Chaos? Mad Venerable Evil Corpse laughed heartily. He wasn't afraid of Yi Shiwen's sword strike. He had refined his body into a divine tool. So, he wasn't afraid of a divine tool of the same level. I can't use Slashing Primal Chaos? You think too much. Yi Shiwen let out another long and loud roar. The spiritual power within his body that seemed to have dried up was suddenly filled to the brim. Then, this surging spiritual power directly poured into the Sword of Destiny. He raised the Sword of Fate high up in the air. It was as if he wasn't raising a sword, but a river of fate. Slash the chaos. Another sword slashed down. This move was completely out of revered Evil Corpse's expectations. He hadn't expected that Yi Shiwen would be able to recover so quickly. In fact, he had recovered in an instant. No, that's not right. Yi Shiwen must have some kind of healing medicine on him. Otherwise, it wouldn't be so terrifying. Violent Corpse Venerable's reaction was quick. He reacted the moment the cleaving primal chaos slashed down. Although this was completely different from what he had said before, he had no choice at this point. Whoosh! His figure instantly flew tens of millions of miles away, directly avoiding the range of the Sword of Destiny's sharp edge. Poochie! At this time, an incomparably huge wound burst out on his chest. Fresh blood sprayed into the chaos. Although he had avoided the misfortune of being cut in half by Yi Shiwen's sword, he was still swept by Yi Shiwen's sword aura. An incomparably huge wound was torn open on his chest. Endless blood sprayed out, and he couldn't stop it. Moreover, due to the aggravation of his injuries, he couldn't stop his aging. White hairs began to appear on his jet black hair. This was enough to prove that revered Evil Corpse wasn't truly invincible. He wasn't without weaknesses. If he were an ordinary half-step ruler, this kind of injury wouldn't have been enough to make him so weak. But revered Evil Corpse was different. He had reached the end of his life. It could even be said that if he didn't fight for his last hope, he wouldn't have come out of his grave. He would have just barely resisted the passage of time in his grave. In the end, he wouldn't even have the strength to come out of his grave. In the end, he would die of old age in his grave, buried in the heavens. He couldn't live past the next era. As powerful as he was, he had to lower his proud head in the face of the passage of time. Reality had proven that immortality was the eternal path of cultivation. But since he had already come out of his grave, he had no other way out. He had to use a considerable portion of his strength to suppress the passage of time in his body. He had to slow down his aging, and he had to do his best to maintain his youth and peak. If he had really aged to that extent, even if he was still powerful as a half-step ruler, it would still be nothing compared to the person before him. But now, Yi Shiwen's sword had severely injured him. His cultivation couldn't suppress the passing of his life, and his hair gradually turned white. So you're only SOSO. How much longer do you think you can live? Yi Shiwen looked at him coldly. Look at your ugly appearance. The way you struggle to survive is just like an old dog that has lost its home. Time. Violent, venerable, evil corpse looked at Yi Shiwen in a frenzy. Yi Shiwen had broken his technique and reduced him to such a state. An unimaginable killing intent flashed in his eyes. I'll kill you now, then go and encircle the martial epic's heavenly Tao. I'll seize that final opportunity. I still have a chance to survive. So you must die. Revered evil corpse was forced into a dead end. Yi Shiwen could buy time, and he could kill him with the power of time alone. But revered evil corpse couldn't. If he dragged it out, he would die. But he didn't know that Yi Shiwen didn't plan to drag it out. He could wait, but the common people couldn't. The fortune god dynasty couldn't. Every minute, every second, countless people died tragically. Their anguished wails rushed into Yi Shiwen's mind. Ever since he became the leader of the fortune god dynasty, he had faintly formed a connection with the common people of the world. He could feel their despair and desolation. Roar! Revered evil corpse let out a loud roar. In an instant, boundless corpse chi spread out. It was as if time had frozen. He was burning his life source to freeze time, so he wouldn't age. At the very least, he had to survive until he killed Yi Shiwen. After devouring his blood essence, he would be able to extend his life for a period of time. In order to survive, he had gone crazy. As the boundless corpse chi spread out, revered evil corpse's injuries healed at an astonishing speed. His white hair returned to its original jet black color. It was as if he had been reborn, returning to his peak state. It wasn't the time when he was struggling to catch his breath, but the true peak state. It was the peak state he had been in many years ago. This feeling intoxicated him, and he almost immersed himself in the feeling of being at his peak. Eastern heavenly venerable of the fortune god dynasty, you've forced me to this point. Only death awaits you. Revered evil corpse's expression became increasingly cold. Corpse Tao laws surged out from his body, and his entire body shone brightly, freezing the chaos in place. It's not certain who will die and who will live. Everything you have is fake, an illusory existence. In fact, you don't have a peak state. Let me personally shatter your fantasy. Yi Shiwen could feel that revered evil corpse had become stronger, but he wasn't afraid. He could only fight. Fake? You dare to say that I'm fake? Revered evil corpse roared, and his figure directly rushed in front of Yi Shiwen. It was as if he had teleported, and his speed was much faster than before. In an instant, he was already in front of Yi Shiwen. Eternal Corpse Tao. Revered evil corpse blasted out a punch. In an instant, the world seemed to be dyed by the power of this punch into a world of Corpse Tao. No one could stop this power. This punch carried an unimaginable power and directly blasted towards Yi Shiwen. Bang! The enchantment of Yi Shiwen's good fortune precious robe shattered with a resounding sound. Evil corpse violent venerable was truly terrifying and powerful at this time. Compared to his current peak state, he was like a dancing clown when he was struggling to catch his breath. There was simply no comparison. This punch directly blasted on the good fortune treasure robe, and circles of energy ripples appeared on the good fortune treasure robe. Although it blocked the punch and didn't let it penetrate the robe, the terrifying and violent power contained in this punch still bombarded Yi Shiwen's body. Puff! Yi Shiwen spurted out a mouthful of blood, which blossomed into a bloody flower amidst the chaos. His entire body instantly flew backwards for millions of miles before he finally came to a stop. He only felt that his internal organs were churning up and down. If it were anyone else, even a peak heavenly venerable, their body would instantly explode after being hit by this punch through the good fortune treasure robe. This was revered evil corpse's true combat power, and it was terrifying to the extreme. I don't need more than 10 moves to kill you. Not to mention that you're wearing the good fortune treasure robe. Even if the good fortune heavenly monarch was wearing the good fortune treasure robe, I can still defeat him. As revered evil corpse recovered to his peak state, his heart also seemed to have returned to the stage where he was the only one in the world, and he didn't put anyone in his eyes. If you want to kill me, then try and see. A phoenix cry resounded in Yi Shiwen's body, and the injuries from before had already recovered. His entire body was glowing, and he held the fate sword in his hand. Instead of retreating, he rushed forward again. Chapter 3772. Boom! It was another earth-shattering collision. Violent corpse venerable and Yi Shiwen collided directly in the chaos. A huge hole appeared in the chaos due to the collision between the two. Sparks flew everywhere. These are not ordinary sparks. Each spark could burn a world. Both of them were covered in blood. Violent deity had a hole in his body, and he was coughing up mouthfuls of blood. Although he had returned to his peak, it didn't mean that his physical body's defensive power had increased substantially. Compared to before, it was not much stronger. It was just that his attack power had increased. Originally, it was difficult for him to hurt Yi Shiwen, but now, he could seriously injure Yi Shiwen. Even though Yi Shiwen was wearing the good fortune treasure robe, a huge fist mark still appeared on his chest. Although it did not directly pierce through, the fist force directly passed through the good fortune treasure robe and bombarded Yi Shiwen's body. Puff! Yi Shiwen spat out a mouthful of blood. His internal organs were surging up and down. No, I can't go on like this. Yi Shiwen thought to himself. Judging from the current situation, even if he wore the good fortune treasure robe and fought Violent Corpse Venerable at all costs, he would at most be able to injure Violent Corpse Venerable. However, if Berserk Corpse Sovereign wanted to escape, it would be very difficult for him to stop it. Under normal circumstances, the best solution would be to wait for Berserk Corpse Sovereign to die. However, he didn't have that much time to wait for Berserk Corpse Sovereign to die. The other battlefields weren't very advantageous either. Under the attacks of the Heavenless Demon Lord, the Northern Lord was forced to retreat again and again. He wasn't a match at all. If it wasn't for the Northern region's destiny, he might not have been able to last until now. On another battlefield, the battle between Sword Venerable and Ghost Granny was even more tragic. Sword Venerable's body was already densely covered with all kinds of cracks. After this battle, the Sword Sovereign would no longer exist. It was no wonder that he had to pay a hefty price to condense a clone that could develop independently. However, he had no other choice. Even so, the Sword Sovereign's foundation was too weak. Even if he fused with the Eastern Sky Sovereign seal, he would not be able to hold on for too long. He would probably be defeated before the Northern Sky Sovereign. At that time, Granny Ghost would be able to take action. The Fortune God dynasty had already suffered repeated defeats under the attacks of the ancient eras. If such a terrifying existence was added to the mix, the consequences would be unimaginable. It was likely that they would be routed for 1,000 miles. Therefore, he didn't have much time left. In fact, he had even less time than rampaging Evil Corpse Venerable. I'm going all out. I must kill you before things get worse. Yi Shiwen clenched his teeth. The supreme ancestral symbol had completely integrated into his body. Boom! A terrifying aura surged from his body, like a crazy tornado, sweeping across the area. The appearance of this terrifying aura immediately shocked the chaos and the few figures fighting in the chaos. That's the direction of Eastern Venerate. Has he already been forced to this extent? Northern Venerate said in shock as he resisted Heavenless Demon Monarch's attack. Heavenless Demon Monarch was also stunned, and a strange look flashed through his eyes. This is the supreme ancestral symbol. Ha! I finally get to see it again. Last time, I let the supreme ancestral symbol escape, so I couldn't get it. Now it's all mine. Heavenless Demon Monarch roared unscrupulously. That's the direction of my main body. My main body was forced to use the supreme ancestral symbol. Is this rampaging evil corpse Venerable really that hard to deal with? Countless thoughts flashed through Sword Venerable's mind. Although he could communicate with his main body, he didn't have the time to do so in the middle of a battle. He knew that his main body wouldn't choose to use the supreme ancestral symbol unless he was forced into a corner. Although the supreme ancestral symbol was powerful, it was also too eye-catching. It would definitely attract the attention of all the half-step sovereigns. Even the half-step sovereigns who hadn't participated in the battle might join in as well. Although it wasn't a sovereign Tao artifact, from a certain point of view, it wasn't too far off. It contained the great Tao of the Talisman Tao era, and it might even contain the secrets and inheritance of the Rune Ancestor. With such a temptation, it wouldn't be strange for the half-step sovereigns to make a move. However, the moment he used it, it meant that he was forced into a dead end. There was no way out. What is that? The power of the Talisman Tao era? Isn't that the legendary supreme ancestral symbol? A greedy look flashed in Granny Ghost's eyes. While she was distracted, Sword Venerable had already pounced on her. Although he didn't have the Sword of Destiny in his hand, its power wasn't inferior to the Sword of Destiny. It was condensed from the Sword Dao Law, and he had infused his Sword Dao will into it. It was indestructible and had endless power. Of course, this was only in terms of power. In reality, it couldn't compare to the Sword of Destiny. If the sword in his hand was destroyed, his Sword Dao would also be destroyed. It was extremely dangerous. If he hadn't been forced into a dead end, he wouldn't have chosen to use this move. There was no other way to hurt Granny Ghost. Poochie! Granny Ghost was struck by Sword Supreme's sword, and her entire body was almost cleaved into two halves. In the deepest part of her body, there was only a piece of skin connecting the two halves of her body. Ah! Granny Ghost let out a loud ghost scream. The terrifying ghost scream shook the entire primal chaos. How dare you hurt me? Granny Ghost's reaction was as fast as lightning. Her ghostly claws directly scratched into Sword Venerable's body. He couldn't resist at all. Most of his body was scratched. He wasn't like Yi Shiwen, who had the Great Fortune Treasure Robe to protect him. Therefore, there was only one way to fight, and that was to exchange injury for injury. Sword Venerable was directly scratched. His face revealed a somewhat painful expression, but it was immediately replaced by a more determined expression. In the nick of time, he escaped from Granny Gue's attack range. The Eastern Celestial Venerate Seal was still in his body. The energy that erupted from it was hurting his body, but at the same time, it also stabilized the injuries inflicted by Granny Gue, preventing them from worsening. He was panting heavily. Most of his body had been scratched. Although his body was gradually recovering, his vitality had been damaged. It was impossible for him to defeat the ghost Granny in front of him. The only thing he could do was to stall for time as much as possible. I'll leave everything to you. Sword Venerable let out another long cry. He turned into a terrifying sword aura that spanned tens of millions of miles across the primal chaos and directly slashed towards Granny Ghost. That should be the supreme treasure of the Talisman Dao era, the supreme ancestral talisman. After the Talisman Dao era was destroyed, I also searched for it for a long time, but I couldn't find it. I didn't expect it to fall here, but it should be mine. The Lord of Mystic Abilities also sensed this terrifying aura. His eyes flashed with greed. Even an ordinary half-step Sovereign Dao tool wouldn't be able to move him so much. However, the Supreme Ancestral Talisman was different. It was related to the supreme existence of the Talisman Ancestor. He finally used this move. Primal Chaos Overlord, who was opposite Divine Ability Lord, was entangled with him. He didn't want to give him any chance to escape and find trouble with Yi Shiwen. He was no stranger to the supreme ancestral symbol. Previously, his doppelganger had been killed by Yi Shiwen, who had fused with the supreme ancestral symbol. If it was said that as an enemy, he would be a little afraid of this power. However, now that he was a comrade, he felt at ease. The more tyrannical Yi Shiwen's strength was, the more at ease he felt. Unknowingly, he had a feeling that the final victory or defeat of this unparalleled war could only depend on Yi Shiwen. Although he was strong, he could only entangle Divine Ability Lord. Although he was young and strong, he could suppress Divine Ability Lord. That was all he could do. Right now, the only one who could create a miracle was Yi Shiwen, who had been constantly creating miracles. In the depths of the boundless void, another figure appeared. It was the half-moon Immortal Lord. He was also alarmed by the supreme ancestral talisman's power. Right now, Yi Shiwen was comparable to a peak heavenly venerate. The power he was using was more shocking than ever before. However, he only took a look at Yi Shiwen's battle and sneered. You overestimate yourself. Then, he disappeared into the boundless chaos again. The entire chaos could sense it, let alone Violent Corpse Venerable, who was facing Yi Shiwen. He could also sense that Yi Shiwen's strength had increased significantly in such a short period of time. It was like a secret technique. The stronger it was, the more damage it would cause to the body. It couldn't be sustained for long. The secret technique that he used to temporarily recover to his peak was like this. I don't care what secret technique you used. I'll stop you first. I can't let your aura continue to grow. Violent, revered, evil corpse's expression turned incomparably solemn. In an instant, he made his move. His fist pierced through the primordial chaos, causing a huge chunk of it to explode and turn into a sky full of immortal light that exploded into the boundless primordial chaos. Even Yi Shiwen, who was wearing the Great Fortune robe, would find it extremely difficult to resist this punch. However, when his punch arrived in front of Yi Shiwen, he was surprised to find that it was blocked by the terrifyingly dense energy on Yi Shiwen's body. There was no special law or magic power. It was just that when a magic power reached a certain level, it would become the most terrifying technique in the world. Although the Supreme Ancestral Talisman wasn't a Dominator Dao artifact, it wasn't any less valuable than a Dominator Dao artifact. I'll kill you in 3 moves. Chapter 3773. With a loud roar, Yi Shiwen's entire body smashed through the primal chaos into nothingness. In an instant, he was right in front of Violent Corpse Venerable / Primal Chaos. Yi Shiwen's sword slashed down, causing the entire primal chaos to tremble violently. Endless primal chaos energy surged out of it. What an astonishing attack! Violent Corpse Venerable hadn't expected Yi Shiwen to directly use it. He had a trump card, but so did Yi Shiwen. Both sides had used their most terrifying trump cards. The power you borrowed isn't yours after all. I'm going to kill you. Violent, venerable, evil corpse roared and punched out. Yi Shiwen's explosive strength was indeed terrifying. However, he had experienced hundreds of battles. He could see that Yi Shiwen had a fundamental weakness, even though he seemed unparalleled. And that weakness was himself. Whether it was the Good Fortune robe, the Sword of Fate, or the Supreme Ancestral symbol, all of them were incredibly powerful. However, their common fatal weakness was Yi Shiwen himself. His body was too weak, which limited the use of these treasures. Boom! The attacks from both sides were like a tidal wave bombarding each other's bodies. Violent Corpse Venerable's entire body was cleaved in half by Yi Shiwen's Sword of Fate. It was a miserable sight to behold, but Yi Shiwen himself was also blasted away with a huge bloody hole in his chest. At the last moment, Violent Corpse Venerable knew that it was impossible to block this sword. So, he simply chose to make both sides suffer. Countless strands of corpse energy rose from Yi Shiwen's body. This was Violent Corpse Venerable's final and most terrifying move. It was originally used to attack half-step sovereigns, but now it was being used to attack Yi Shiwen. One could only imagine what kind of attack Yi Shiwen was facing right now. Suppress for me. Yi Shiwen forcibly suppressed the injuries on his body. At this time, he didn't have the time to treat his injuries. After suppressing his injuries, Yi Shiwen flew out again. The Sword of Fate in his hand blossomed with light that filled the sky. The immortal light was like a waterfall that shone brightly in the primal chaos. No matter what kind of trump card you have, you're dead today. Yi Shiwen faced upwards and roared. The entire primal chaos was immersed in his roar. As the Fortune Divine Dynasty's decline accelerated, countless people died tragically. These people's resentment before they died were transmitted into his mind, angering him to the extreme. This sword will slay you on behalf of the world. The sword light ignited the entire chaos. Then, it was as though billions of sword lights had gathered together and slashed down. Mad, venerable, evil corpse didn't have the time to say anything. Or rather, he didn't have the time to say anything. He only had enough time to restore his body that had been cut in half. Then, he fiercely punched towards the void and created a corpse Dao world. He used the power of the world to suppress Yi Shiwen. But this time, in front of this sword, it was too insignificant. There was no power that could stop it at all. The corpse world that he punched out was not a match for it all. It was destroyed on the spot. Then, it turned into corpse aura that filled the sky and dispersed into the primal chaos. The sword's momentum didn't slow down at all as it slashed down, colliding with Violent Corpse Deity's fist. Boom! Violent Corpse Deity's fist was shattered on the spot, and it exploded into a cloud of blood mist in the air. Ah! Violent Corpse Deity screamed in pain. This attack was even more terrifying than the previous one. Yi Shiwen's sword had broken through all of his attacks. His next attack couldn't even cause the slightest bit of damage to Yi Shiwen anymore. This was the most sorrowful thing for him. Yi Shiwen had won this round. Yi Shiwen's anger erupted at the thought of those people who had died tragically. Boom! That sword slashed down ruthlessly, landing on the body of the evil corpse mad deity, instantly causing it to explode. That sword was too terrifying, causing a terrifying crack that was billions of miles long to appear in the entire primordial chaos. It was a terrifying wound that not even the primordial chaos could recover from. Final sword. Yi Shiwen's sword had destroyed Violent Corpse Deity, but he didn't stop there. He knew that this attack had injured Violent Corpse Deity, but it wasn't enough to kill him. A half-step ruler's vitality was too terrifying. If he let him go, the consequences would be unimaginable. If that happened, who knew how many people would die at his hands? In order to recover, these former supremes were willing to do anything. In front of him, the evil corpse berserker lord had condensed a new body, but he was already heavily injured. He was no longer at his peak state. It could be said that his entire body was covered in wounds, and blood was constantly flowing out. Moreover, his head of black hair had turned completely white at some point in time. All kinds of wrinkles had also appeared on his skin. This was almost impossible for a top expert like him, a martyr in his twilight years. However, that sword strike had already cut off all of his life essence. He simply did not have the strength to maintain his peak state. At this moment, Xiao Chan finally revealed some horror on his face. He was afraid of death. Yes, extremely afraid of death. If not for that, he would not have come to the martial epic to try his luck, seeking a chance of survival in the midst of the martial epic's collapse. Previously, he was so arrogant because he didn't care about Yi Shiwen at all. He was confident that Yi Shiwen couldn't cause any harm to him. But now, it seemed that this wasn't the case. Yi Shiwen truly had the ability to kill him. You're already in this state, and you still want to struggle? This sword will send you to where you belong. Yi Shiwen roared, and his aura crazily rose, becoming more and more terrifying. He wanted to kill a peerless expert, achieving something that no one had ever done before. In the past, when the Fortune God dynasty was at its peak, when the Fortune Heavenly Monarch dominated the world, someone else appeared in the Fortune God dynasty. You want to kill me? I'll drag you to hell with me. After the initial fear, Violent Corpse Venerable fell into a terrifying rage. He had never been forced into such a desperate situation. He didn't lack the courage to fight to the death if necessary. Up until now, he was heavily injured, and his lifespan was reaching its end. Even if he killed Yi Shiwen, he wouldn't be able to make it in time for the Feast of Immortality. He couldn't make it in time for the Feast of Immortality, but he could take Yi Shiwen away. Drag him to hell with me. After a furious roar, a terrifying power surged out of his body and turned into a terrifying attack. It was a dark place where light could never be seen. Endless corpse energy filled the air. It was an incomparable battlefield, and no one knew where it was. And on this battlefield, a dazzling figure appeared. The moment he appeared, he single-handedly sucked in all the stone chi that had permeated the entire battlefield for billions of years. Since he was born, he was already an emperor. Even the heavens couldn't tolerate him. Boundless calamities and tribulations were sent down, but he managed to survive them all. Wherever he went, the corpse Tao spread. This was the scene of the creation of the world, and he was the one and only God of creation. This was the situation when he was first born, and he integrated that scene into his own martial arts, completely turning it into a terrifying move called the Corpse Tao World Creation online to create this terrifying scene. The mighty world directly turned into a borderless tide, connecting the past, the present, and the future as if it ran through the river of time. Then, it directly evolved into an attack, blasting towards Yishiwen. In an instant, the entire chaos of the universe changed color. No matter what kind of expert they were all shocked by this attack. How terrifying was this attack? It was too unyielding. Is this violent corpse venerable going to restart the corpse Dao era in this chaos? This is the ultimate attack. But it wasn't just violent corpse venerable who erupted with the ultimate attack. Yishiwen also slashed out with a slash of primal chaos, reaching its peak. Even the half-step sovereigns were shocked. Are these two going to perish together? Everyone was shocked by the two's attacks. Even for a half-step sovereign realm expert, such an attack would require them to burn all their life force in order to accomplish it. Boom! A terrifying explosion sounded. That ray of light was like the light of creation, drowning everything. The chaos was annihilated, turning into nothingness. After the two terrifying attacks collided, it turned into a raging tide that drowned everything, including the two of them. This terrifying, raging tide even spread out of the battlefield, sweeping towards the other battlefields. The half-step sovereigns on the other battlefields were shocked. Two dead? Kiki, perfect. After the initial shock, Granny Ghost only smiled coldly. Her expression was grave and stern. She was not moved at all by the death of the evil corpse revered. There was no friendship between them in the first place. They just wanted a share of the martial epic's gluttonous feast. Now that one was dead, they could all get a bit more. Moreover, she was also shocked by the previous attack. Yishiwen, a heavenly venerable, actually had the ability to threaten them. Now that the two of them were both injured, it was naturally a good thing. She increased the intensity of her attacks. Sword Venerable could no longer hold on. He only had half his body left, and he was still fighting. The other half had already been cut off by Granny Ghost. But he didn't give up. He wouldn't give up. The Eastern Heavenly Sovereign seal on you is mine, he. Granny Ghost laughed sinisterly. She looked at Sword Venerable with cold eyes, as if she was looking at a corpse that had been dead for a long time. You're tuning into the Warrior Lore YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.